Good morning, everybody. Do you like drinking coffee? I hope that you do. It surely helps you get out of bed in the morning. Well, maybe not out of bed in the morning because you have to get out of bed to make it. But if you do like coffee, and you like good coffee, and you like supporting a brand that's founded and run by fantastic people, go to blackriflecoffee.com and check out what they have. Apparel, mugs, hats, shirts, bags of coffee, ground, bean, everything you can want. It's basically everything peripheral to everything coffee. blackriflecoffee.com. That's it. My guest today is named Jonathan Mattingly. He served as a Louisville, Kentucky police officer for 21 years. Most of his adult life he spent in the service of others. You may not recognize his name, but he was directly involved in an incident that you likely will recognize, and that was the loss of life of Breonna Taylor. When I mean directly involved, I mean he was standing at the threshold of the door, exchanging fire before he was removed from the situation due to receiving a gunshot wound high in his leg. I have heard multiple versions of what happened that evening, none of them through somebody who was actually there. And today I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody through the lens of their own experience. And I found it to be pretty shocking in comparison to the narrative and story that I had heard elsewhere. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let John speak for himself. Episode 221 with John Mattingly. Enjoy.
Okay, I got the red smoke. Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
How's the last 2 years of your life been?
Oh, a little chaotic. Fun.
What you signed up for?
Not exactly.
So let us rewind for people. Introduce yourself to begin with. I could fuck it up in an attempt, or you could give me the wave tops.
All right. My name is John Mattingly. I was a police officer for 21 years for Louisville Metro Police. And in 2020, March 13th, we did the Breonna Taylor raid for a search warrant, and everything just went south from there.
It's interesting. And for people who maybe find this podcast because of the topic that we're going to be, I'm sure, discussing among many. But so I have no law enforcement background. I was in the military. I have access to no other information than what most people are bombarded with or they seek out. And having said all that, what I think is interesting is the way that you even just described it, because I suspect it wasn't the Breonna Taylor raid. I suspect her name probably wasn't on any of the paperwork, or if it was, but you guys were there for probably somebody else in my estimation, but now that entire incident is known as that.
Well, let me give you a little background on that.
Yeah.
Because, you're a little mistaken, and a lot of people didn't think her name was on the warrant.
Yeah.
But it actually was. Her name was on the warrant. Her car was on the warrant. Her apartment was on the warrant.
Okay.
Now, Kenneth Walker, the guy that shot me, wasn't on the warrant because he was the boyfriend at the time. She was kind of off and on with him for several years, and the other guy who was the main target of the investigation, Jamarcus Glover. And what Jamarcus had done is he had used her apartment as his address. His license was at her address.
Yep.
His bank account was at her address. His car was registered to her address. He would drive her car around to deliver some drugs. He would pick packages up there. They weren't sent to him directly, but there's photos where the detectives on scene had taken him go into the apartment, come out with packages in his hand, and go straight to the trap house. So that's how she was involved in this.
Not the primary.
Correct.
Yeah.
Her apartment, the reason we were there that night wasn't to lock her up. Had nothing to do with locking her up. What they were trying to do was get paperwork, possible drugs or money that were being stored there to tie in the organization that they were looking at down on, it's called Elliott Street. It's the street that there were several abandoned type houses that were used for trap houses on that block that they were using.
What is a trap house?
Trap house is where usually nobody lives there. It's a kind of a junky place that you wouldn't even want to hang out in. You wouldn't even want to watch TV in. Most of them are pretty dirty. The guys bring their dope there during the day, and they'll have lookouts front and back, guns, dope, and they'll sell out of that house to all the junkies in the area or people that come down to pick up. Then usually they go home at night, or one person will stay if they decide to leave some drugs there that night. But generally, like in this situation, there was 2 abandoned houses next to this one, which wasn't actually abandoned. They were renting the house, and they were keeping the drugs and stuff at these other abandoned houses, just burying them different places, hiding them under floorboards, stuff like that.
So a remote location that you can do business out of,
Correct.
essentially.
That you don't live at, that you have a little bit of, this ain't mine. If somebody pops in, all these other guys are here. This isn't mine.
Before we start talking about the incident specifically, let's go back in time, because what I want is to give you the opportunity to provide context for the entire 21-year career.
Okay.
I have watched in my own previous occupation, people will have decades-long careers in it, and they'll then be involved with something that makes the national news from a Department of Defense perspective. And it's almost as if they're that guy for the rest of their life.
Right.
And they had no intention of doing that along the way. And I think it does a disservice to everything that may have led up to whatever hit the news. So where are you from?
I'm from Louisville.
Okay.
I grew up in actually a very poor
hometown boy, if you will.
That's right. I grew up in a very poor part of Louisville. It's called Portland neighborhood. And it was, when I was growing up, it was primarily white, but it was very, like I said, poor, a lot of fights, drug activity, that type stuff. And it bordered up on, it was really bizarre how this was set up as I was growing up. You had like from 15th Street to 34th Street, and then from the river over to Market Street was primarily white. And we had like one block at 25th and what's called St. Xavier that had some apartments in it that always had a black family in it. So it was really territorial back then. If the blacks came in, they would come play ball at the parks with us because we played at the city parks. And there was never any beef or issue, but it just wasn't their area, if that makes sense. There was like different turfs.
Yeah.
And the white guys sold the dope there. The black guys sold the dope in their area in the West End. And they butted up to each other, but people knew which lines to cross and which not. It was more territorial back then than it is now. Now with diversified housing, they've torn down all of our projects in Louisville. We had, I think, 5 or 6 of them when I first came on the police department. Now there's none. And they've diversified the black and white communities together, which isn't a bad thing. But at the same time, it totally threw off the vibe of what the city kind of was. Like when we had projects, if we had a shooter and we knew exactly where he would be because those guys always just gravitated back to their home. And so it's made it a little more difficult to police because now they're in every end of town. But as far as helping the people that really need to be helped, it's been a good thing for some of them.
Yeah. What led you towards law enforcement?
Well, I talk about it in my book. Growing up in that community, I would go to like Kroger. We were poor too. And I would see a kid younger than me with Jordans on, pocket full of hundreds. And I knew exactly where he got it. There was a guy named Merle that was the main dope dealer in that area. And he would recruit, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys to come in. He had a huge pool in his backyard and a trampoline, zip line. It was like, big playground for older kids. And I used to see these kids, and they would go to their homes. They wouldn't have electricity or water or food, but man, they're dressed to the nines, and he'd buy them Jordans and give them cash so they go deliver their dope for him. And that stuff used to just tick me off. I don't know why. I wasn't in the dope game. I was raised in a Christian home, and so while I was able to go play ball at the park and do things, I was in the community, but I wasn't one of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
My parents did a good job sheltering me that way, but it opened my eyes early on to what life is, to what the real world is. I wasn't raised in one of these little spoon-fed households and all this stuff where I didn't get to see reality. So I saw it, and it drove me nuts. I would see people getting taken advantage of, or old people getting abused, or kids getting grabbed by their hair by their parents, dragged in the house. And that kind of stuff just infuriated me. And I thought, man, I want to do something to make a difference. And the military I always wanted to go in the military growing up, either police, military, or cowboy. But cowboys and Indians were over, so I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, you missed it on the calendar.
Yeah,
that
about 100 years.
Yeah,
I was off. Sure. But had I been in those days, that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of always in me. I like to, adrenaline junkie like most type A guys are, that you just, always taking those chances and pushing the envelope a little bit. So that was just in me. I wanted to help others. And it wasn't for the glory. It wasn't for, I didn't want to be a superhero. I just saw the injustices and it rubbed me wrong. I didn't like it.
So how long? I'm assuming you went, through the educational system, high school, and then did you go to college first before starting your career in law enforcement?
I did. So I got married real early. I got married when I was 19. And my wife at the time really didn't want me to go in law enforcement. She was like, oh, no, there's a high divorce rate. It's dangerous, all this stuff. So I put that off. I went to college. First, I went to University of Louisville and Jefferson Community College right there. And then I ended up finishing at Shawnee Baptist College. It's a Bible college, and I actually took pastoral studies because my dad's a pastor. And I knew I wanted to help people. And since I couldn't help in law enforcement, I mean, I could have, but I didn't want to,
You had made the choice not to pursue that.
Right.
Yep.
Because that was our joint decision. And, but when I was about 26, man, I just got that burn again. I got that desire. And so I've got a degree in pastoral theology, and I'm coaching basketball at a Christian school and working for the church and doing different things. And then I was like, this isn't what I'm called to do. This is what my dad does, and it's great. It's awesome, but it's not me. And so I'd already kind of missed, now that I'm married, I'd missed the military part that I couldn't go into because I graduated in 91 and the Gulf War kicked off while I was in high school. And so, that's when Lee Greenwood was out singing the song and everybody's, you're ready to mount up and go. You just, let's do it. And so I wanted to do it, but then got married to my high school sweetheart, and that kind of put that on out of possibility.
As it does.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And so I didn't get on the police department until I was 27. I talked to her. We made the decision. Okay, if that's going to make you happy, do it. And that's what I did. And I'm glad I waited. I'm glad I didn't come on when I was 21 because you're not ready.
I was just
not ready.
going to say the same thing. And again, through the lens of somebody who's never spent a single day in law enforcement, I look back at who I was when I was 21 and what I was doing. I didn't kill myself or other people accidentally because of the mentors that I had around me that essentially and metaphorically had a hand on me at all times. I think the later you go into that occupation, probably the better, because you have some tread worn off the tire.
Yeah.
You have some experience. The world that you're operating in is obviously dynamic and changing, and the more complex decision-making successes that you have going into that, I think the better.
Yeah. And life's knocked you down a little bit. You're not quite as cocky as you were when you were 2021 thinking you could, conquer the world.
We have a more robust understanding of the world. You've interacted with it more. I think maybe some of the shiny veneer has worn off a little bit. You see the realities.
And I had 3 kids by the time I joined the department too.
So you're a little bit crazy. You got married at 19. You already had 3 kids. Mm-hmm. How many children do you have now? 4. Okay. I thought you were going to say for a second 14.
Well, but my wife and I now kept trying, but she kept having miscarriages, so it just didn't work out.
Yeah, that sucks. I'm very sorry to hear that. So in comparison to your peers in the police academy, though, where did you sit age-wise? I'm going to guess more towards the older of the crew.
Actually, there was a few really young guys, 21, 22, but the majority seemed more kind of my age. And then we had one guy that was even older, and this he was already super successful. I mean, he was a millionaire, owned his own business, building houses and doing all that. And he came to me, and great guy. I mean, awesome guy, squared away, head on his shoulders. And he was like, man, this is my retirement job. This is what I always wanted to do. This is what I'm doing.
Weird.
Yeah.
My retirement job, which is actually combining 2 terms that are not often confirmed.
Correct.
Combined.
And you go from, and the thing is, this guy was amazing. So the academy's tough. It wears you out.
About 6 months?
Ours was, what was ours? We had 32. Oh, no, we only had 20 weeks in the academy.
Okay.
They've changed it now. It's more. But even at 20 weeks, we were done.
It's still about 4 months.
Yeah. And then we had 32 weeks on the street with a field training officer. So we had a year total of training.
Yeah.
But this guy, man, he would get up at 5 a.m, go pour concrete, go do all the stuff with his crew, come to the academy, go all day, go back, finish working at night, go home, get a few hours sleep, do it every day. I mean, this guy was a machine.
Did he? I'm assuming he made it through.
Yeah, he just retired when I did last year.
Okay, so his retirement job lasted quite a bit.
Yeah, 20 years.
Holy cow!
And he never stopped his other job. It just kept growing and growing and growing. His business.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
As with most things and most people's goals in life, I think the number one obstacle that stands in front of them is the limitations they put on themselves.
Right.
You get somebody like that who says, 24 hours in a day, huh? All right, cool. Hold my beer.
Yeah.
And it's just cranking it out on both ends. Yeah, that's
And older when he started.
yeah.
You know, the young guys were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm done. I can't do this." And he's like, "Boys," he had a real country accent. "Boys, come on.
Yeah.
We got stuff to do." And then we go.
Was the academy thought what was going to be? How was your experience?
I think being older helped because you go in and you know, all right, this dude that's yelling at me in front of me, he can't touch me. He can't eat me. He can't kill me. I'll just take it. And
You see it for what it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew it was just a simple, let's get your mind ready for what you're going to face on the street. I'm not here to attack you. We can be friends after this. I'm just preparing you. So once you get that, the rest of it's easy.
I ask all the law enforcement people I have on whether or not they feel the academy adequately prepared them for the street.
We had one instructor that came in and told us the truth. He said, as soon as you graduate, forget everything you learned here and learn in real life, because this is all great in textbook and it's all great in, you know, how things can perfectly go if you do this. But it's kind of like martial arts. You know, if you're rowing in jiu-jitsu and somebody's, okay, now do this, now do this. Okay, now free row. And then all of a sudden, the dude's not going as slow as he was in practice, and you can't get that hold. And you're like, wait a minute, hold on, this technique isn't working. Why not?
You spend an hour.
That's real life.
What you're describing happens to me all the time. You spend an hour with a willing partner and you go for a few minutes and you, like isolating one, okay, put your knee here, grab like this.
Yeah.
And your partner's just, yes, here is my arm. And then both of you, having just attended the same class on the same technique, doing it on each other for an hour, as soon as the buzzer actually goes on the first roll that's outside of those class parameters, none of that shit works.
No.
I mean, it actually works, but you have two people who know the same thing who are trying to do it to each other.
Right.
And then also doing the defense.
Yeah, if you could just get that one punch in to distract him, you'd be all right.
Yeah.
Like, hold up for a second. Yeah.
God, that happens in almost every class. Yeah. The broken down textbook version of in a perfect world where you can get everything you want, this is what you would do. And then you throw it up against an opponent who knows what you know, knows the defense, and is trying to execute that.
Right. And the problem with law enforcement and that, and in any area of life, military, whatever, is you've got these administrators who have never physically done much work. You know, they may be police officers, but they were the guys who, you know, instantly went to district resource officer and then got put in some kind of public relations thing or IT, and they worked their way up, took tests. They're good test takers, but horrible cops. And then all of a sudden they're writing out all of your policy. Oh, no, this is textbook. This is how we were told to do it in this training, or when I went through this school, this is what they taught us to do. And so then you're trying to live real life inside these rules that are virtually impossible. So you've got a inch and a half thick standard operating procedure that you're supposed to abide by, that they can go through that in almost any stop, gig you on something if they wanted. And the problem is that doesn't take place until you're in the limelight on something like this. And then all of a sudden, man, it's what happened in 12 seconds. They dissect for over 2 years, and they pick it apart, and they look, and they're trying to find something, any angle they can find, just to discredit you or find a reason to let you be the fall guy, and so they can say, well, it wasn't us. We had these rules. They went outside of them.
Why do you think they allow that structure to exist for those who, when they make it through I'm assuming that the policymakers went through the same academy. So what you're saying is they have less street experience because for whatever reason they pursued a more bureaucratic position, maybe? I don't know the correct word. I don't want to put words into your mouth. But why do they allow those people to ascend to those ranks where then they are now setting doctrine?
Well, number one, I think the main thing they could do when you're starting to go through the promotional process is they could have peer reviews. You know, because if you work with a guy, you know what they're like. You know if they're the guy that's slow to the run because they don't really want to get their hands dirty, they're a little scared, or they make the extra trip around and you're like, or they're hanging off the air way too long on a report and you're having to pick up all their stuff. And so there's no peer review. It's simple test taking, and then you go through a process where it's kind of like sitting here. They play a scenario and you write out your response, and then you verbally give your response to how you would handle it. And it's such BS, man. I mean, the stuff that you had to say on the oral interview to get accepted or get passed by these outside evaluators is stuff that you'd never use in real life. I'll give you a real quick example. So you say there's a hostage situation on the street. What do you do? Well, typically you go, the first officer's on scene, they assess it, and if they realize this is something beyond our capability or not smart to do, we'll hold the perimeter, We'll call our bosses. They make the decision whether they call the hostage negotiating team, have SWAT on standby. And that's how that plays out. Occasionally, the mobile command center will come in if it's a real cold or if it's going to be a long period of time, if they need to make contact. Mm-hmm. But on these assessments, the answers you give are, I'm going to call TARC, which is our public busing system there. I'm going to call them to have them get people in and out of the code. I'm going to call Red Cross, have them come be on standby. I mean, call LG&E in case they need to shut off the gas and electric. I'm going to call all these things that are just never take place. I'm going to have the helicopters up the whole time. I'm going to have an emergency route set up. I'm going to have all these impractical things that in a real world, I mean, if you can get one of those things, you're pretty lucky, just because resources and things are broke or people aren't available. But you give all these crazy, huge answers and they go, man, this guy's brilliant. I like him. He needs to be in a leadership position. That doesn't mean you're a leader. It means you know how to write stuff on paper and regurgitate it.
Well, leadership and leadership positions are often not found in the same person.
You're right.
Are the answers that they're giving, that they're looking for, is that in doctrine somewhere? Are these in manuals somewhere? So they have this ability to pull that information out, and it may appear to be correct on paper, but might fail in the execution on the street?
I can't tell you where it came from because I don't know, but it came from some source that pushes this, because it was passed down to me from somebody who got it from an assistant chief. And then they got promoted, and they were all assistant chief. And this person here was a lieutenant. He had gotten promoted using the same strategy. And the person that the assistant chief got it from used to be an assistant chief before they retired. So the same system had been going on for years with the same type answers, because what was passed down to us was an outline. And it was basically, if you can learn this outline and you knew what to fill in this outline, it could be a little bit different than the next guy, but here's the outline. If you could plug those answers in, you're going to do fine.
This is what they're looking for type thing?
That's it. I went from between 32nd and 36. I was tied for 32nd, 36 on the written interview or written test to number 5, simply because I had that outline. I jumped all those people.
Oh, wow.
Because I was able to go in and articulate what that outline wanted. It wasn't because it's stuff I would really do on the street. It was just stuff that I knew they wanted. So you give them what they want so you can get your position.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about, having people who are very detached from the realities on the ground, writing policy for those that engage with, I'll call it a boots on the ground, for my old terminology. It exists in the military too, and I don't know a solution to it. What I saw in my own time in, there was a core group of people who were so incredibly good at the job and got so violently turned off by the bureaucracy that they would get to a place where they were looking at trying to fight that bureaucracy and climb the ladder themselves, or getting out. And of course they had other options in between those, but it seemed like the two choices that they would make. Totally anecdotally, without having any data to support this, what I felt and what I saw with my own eyes was that most of them made the choice to not buck the system and to get out. So what does that leave you? Maybe a cohort of people that it wouldn't necessarily be great that they ascend the chain of command, because at least in the military, it's a rock, paper, rank organization. And if you get the wrong people high enough, it's pretty goddamn hard to get them out. Like, that tick might bury itself in so far that you can't. And I often found that those individuals who you would like, how did this person ever get to this position? They also like to surround themselves with people of similar nature.
Oh, yeah.
A polite way to say it. Of course, not every leader was like that in the military. The vast majority were not, but it was an issue because the military, I mean, they only have the pool of people that they can pull from.
Right.
When the hard charger, who I think would be fantastic in those roles, when they eject, they're like, okay, well, how many other heartbeats do we have left? Like, here's our pool of people. You get the wrong people high enough, they pull the wrong people up, and then you have a systematic problem, to which I don't have the solution to. But I saw what I think would be described as parallels to what it is you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite the same. And I didn't even want to take the test when I did for sergeant. I was in a great group, a small narcotics group, having a blast, man. You know, I'd only been on, well, at that point, almost 9 years. But I was still enjoying what I did. Loved it. Great group of guys. And my sergeant at the time came to me and she said, do you see all these idiots they're promoting? I was like, yeah. She said, are you taking the test? I went, no. She said, do you want to work with them or do you want to work for them?
It's a good question.
And I was like, yeah, I don't want to work for them. But the problem with once you go past sergeant, once you become lieutenant, I never aspired to be a lieutenant, didn't want to be. Sergeant, you still had hands on with your guys. You're still on the street. Mm-hmm. You're still a cop. Once you become lieutenant, it's more paperwork. and they've lost a lot of the juice they used to have. And
Are you still out in a cop car though as a lieutenant, or is that more of a, you're like at a precinct?
you're more at a precinct. If things are real short, you'll go out and help. But yeah, generally.
You're not the first line of defense anymore?
No.
Probably for a good reason.
And most of the guys don't want the lieutenant showing up. They see him pull up
understand that.
and they tighten up a little bit and they're like, oh man, I don't, why is he here? That's the first question. What do we do? Why is he here?
Yeah.
But back in 2003 when we merged, they went away from, we used to have, it was sergeant, lieutenant, and then captains. And the captains ran all the divisions or all the special operations stuff. And those were promoted positions. So once you got there, you were locked in because it was a civil servant position. And so it was very hard to get people out of those until they retired. And there was very few of them because they were the top of your pool. And the mayor had a good idea when he came in, or in 2003, as a way to control the police department a lot better. Because in Louisville, and I'm sure it appears it's this way in most major, especially liberal cities, the police chief don't run the police department. You know, they might be the figurehead, they might be the spokesperson, but they don't call the shots. In Louisville, our assistant mayor was at all the main meetings, and she called all the shots. And if the chief said something, she could override him in a heartbeat, and he would just go, yes, ma'am. And that's what they're doing. Even though she had never had any police experience, no background in it, this is what the mayor wants, this is what we're doing. And the chief would just cowtail and do it.
Did he have to, or when you're in that position, and I'm sure this changes per city, but is there a rank structure that puts that individual over the police chief? Does it have to be like that, or is that a choice?
That's the mayor chooses that. They decide. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the chain of command going up to the mayor for information, but not as far as running it. And that's why I think we need more elected sheriffs, more running the police departments. You know, do away with police and have everybody have sheriffs. That way, if you don't like what I'm doing in 4 years or 2 years, whatever that rank is, vote me out. And let's get somebody in there that's going to combat this stuff. Because the police department is nothing now but a arm of the city leaders. I mean, we're seeing it in Canada. We see it all over the state.
Because of that rank structure that's going up to the city leaders?
Because the mayor controls everything. They are the one in power. And there's no accountability on their part other than the voting structure. But again, a lot of people don't know that. So when they blame the police, they never blame the mayor with it, even though it may have been his call or her call. Yeah. It's simply, well, it's the police's fault. And the mayor knows that. These mayors aren't dumb. They know they're insulated between that, and they can use the police departments as pawns to go out and take care of their dirty business that they don't want to have their hands dirty on. And then they can step back and go, hey, it wasn't me. You know, something needs to be done with these guys. They're out of control.
Do you think it's that malicious?
100%. After going through what I went through, I know it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any experience in it. I would like to think, I try to do my best, emphasis on try, to do my best to give people the benefit of the doubt and look for the good in people. I'm not always successful. It's the best way that I can put that.
Well, I'm that way by nature. I'm that way by nature, and I try to be the voice of reason and say, well, let's look at it this way. Well, maybe they didn't know this. Well, maybe they didn't think that. But now after going through this, at least with our city, I know the different corruption levels that exist and where they're at, and I think that scares them. You know, now nothing's really being done because, again, these mayors aren't really held accountable by anybody. They can kind of do what they want, and even when you expose them on certain things, it's just like news. Number one, the liberal media kind of has our mayor's back, because if he reaches out and say, hey, don't do that story, it doesn't happen. It just kind of disappears in the news cycle. It might be there for a 10-second blip and it's gone. And people think, man, that's conspiracy theorist stuff. And I did too. I honestly did. I thought, no, there's no way all this stuff goes on that you hear these crazy right-wingers or whatever talk about. But then when you go through it and you're the one getting thrown under the bus, you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize to the depth of all the different connections. Because then you have people that you don't even know reaching out to you going, hey, did you know this is so-and-so's cousin, or this is their friend, or they're the developer over here that they were trying to get that land cleared out. And then all of a sudden you go, there are way too many coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences, number one. Yeah. But way too many that if you didn't think that way, that you could simply connect all the dots and go, the aha moment comes on your head and you go, this is corrupt. And I'm thinking, if it's that way on a city level, on a city the size of Louisville, which is about 1 million people, what is it on a national level? You know, where does it stop?
Yeah. How are your first few years on the force?
Awesome. Oh man, I didn't want to go home at night. I mean,
How'd your wife feel about that?
I don't know. Well, we're not married, so
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
no. My wife now's great. She was great with all of it, but
Yeah.
and my first wife was great with it too. I'm not disparaging her. She was good with me working, but yeah, it was man, it was like a Cops episode. I mean, the stuff you see, and like I said earlier, I was fortunate enough to grow up in an area that my eyes were already peeled back. So I can't imagine what it's like for a guy or a girl who grows up in a nice community, goes to a private school, then goes to, get their college degree, then comes back and becomes a cop and is thrown into the jungle. You're out here going, oh my goodness. Because even me, after, 15, 20 years, there was stuff I'd see and go, I didn't think that was possible, because it's just constantly people are crazy. I mean, this world's messed up.
If there's anything that seems to be resoundingly true, it is that people are crazy, for sure. And if you give them enough time, you'll probably see it.
Yes.
And I'm speaking, for those of you listening, absolutely about myself here. Probably some frayed edges between my own ears as well. So where'd your career go, from starting? How did the roles that you kind of held throughout your career?
So I was on late watch for 5 years. Enjoyed
Late
it.
watch, is that like...
Which is midnight to 8 a.m.
I was going to say, is that called night shift?
Yes, night shift. So midnight to 8 a.m. for the first 5 years. And then I went to our flex unit, which is it's basically a unit that's supposed to be flexible for the major of that division. So if you have a bunch of car break-ins, hey, go take care of that. If you got street robberies, go take care of that. It's just a group of 5, 6, 7 guys or girls that is a unit that is responsible for all that. Now, all the complaints that come into the division, they'd filter down to the flex units. And probably 85% of what we did was narcotics, because that's kind of the source to your break-ins, to your carjackings, to your shootings. It all comes back to the narcotics trade. And once you attack that, if you can get a dealer out off the street who is kind of the arm or the shot caller on these different things, then you can reduce some of those other crimes. So the majority of the work we did was that. I did that until 2009. We're promoted to sergeant, went back to late watch for a year, and then I went to our division detective unit as a sergeant for a little over a year and a half. Couldn't stand it. It was day work, tie. It just wasn't me.
Was it anything what it looks like on TV? I mean, you're out there attempting to solve crimes, I'm assuming?
Somewhat. You're so overwhelmed with paperwork and with new cases that unfortunately the citizens don't get
The service they probably think or want.
Yeah, or that they deserve.
Yeah.
Because you're so overwhelmed. Like as one detective, you might get 5 or 6 cases in one day, and then the next day 3, and then the next day 6, and you just can't. It's impossible to keep up with between writing the reports, trying to follow up, get camera, talk to people. It just doesn't work. And so you've got to kind of go through and go, okay, which ones are my most serious, or which ones are the most time restraint that need to get focused on, and you kind of do it like that. But unfortunately, by the end of a month, you might have a stack of paperwork that you haven't even touched. And so then when people call and they're angry and they're upset, rightfully so, there's not much you can tell them except call the mayor. We need more bodies. We need more resources. There's only so many hours in a day, and for years there was no overtime. No, we couldn't have overtime. There's no way. And we're like, but how are we supposed to do this job? Figure it out. Okay. And so that causes people in cases to get neglected.
Yeah.
So then in 2011, 2012, in the beginning of it, I went back to a flex division, or unit in the division I was in. In October 2012, I went to what was called Viper. It was a violent crime unit. Went after shooters, gang members, homicides, robbers, that type of thing. All the worst of the worst. I did that from 2012 to 15, best time of my career. I mean, it was every day, all day, going. I mean, foot chases, car chases, fights, warrants. It was just nonstop, go. And we were very successful. We would get I think in one year we got 1,500 guns off the street, just our unit. And so it was a good unit. It was making an impact, making a difference. And when the assistant chief that was over that unit left, the new person coming in, and instead of going, man, what y'all doing is really having an impact. It's working. I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the stats. I'm looking at the crime data. They decided, hey, let's reinvent the wheel again, because I'm new and I want my name attached to something different. And so that took place, and I didn't like the direction it was going. And I was like, I'm out. I got to go. And if anybody knows any kind of police work, it would be like this. It would be like you going from your special operations division and being so frustrated with command that you said, I just want to go back to being a grunt. Just put me back in the regular uniform and I'll do that stuff. Nobody does that because, you've reached where you want to go in your pinnacle and you're enjoying it. You're having a good time. So to have the willingness to say, just put me back on the beat, put me back in uniform in a division. I just want out. I don't agree with how this is going. I don't like it. It doesn't make sense.
What kind of stuff were they changing?
So we went from coming in, kind of getting a game plan together, like a roll call, and saying, okay, this is what we're going after today. And it's very fluid. It can change as the day goes on because you're getting calls from homicide going, hey, we just had a shooter over here. Can you reach out to your sources, try to find out who it is? And these guys, it wasn't me. The guys that worked for me were so good. I mean, it'd be like an hour or two. Okay, we're going to get so-and-so over here on Camp Street. Let's go. All right, let's do it. Call homicide. Hey, we got your guy. And I remember that homicide sergeant one night about 2 a.m. We just gone in an apartment, got a guy for him, brought him out. And he walked up to me. He went, how do y'all do this? And I looked at him and said, it ain't me. It's those guys, the tech savvy guys and the guys who know what they're doing with all the informants and all the contacts. He said, in all my years in homicide, and I think he'd been there 15 years as a sergeant, he said, we've never had turnaround like this where we get people so quickly. And I mean, that makes you feel good because you're like, okay, what I'm doing is working. So then when they come in and they said, one of the things they did, 2015 is when the Michael Brown stuff popped off. And so there was a lot of animosity toward the police. And
refresh my memory on Michael Brown.
Ferguson.
Gotcha.
The first big explosion. And that was right after what was the case in Florida with the kid and the guy who chased him down and shot him.
It was a stand your ground, right? He was found not guilty. I know who you're talking about. I think I know the incident you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, it said he had Skittles and he'd gone to the store. But and everybody equates that to police. Anytime you're talking about white, black police, that story gets thrown in. And I'm like, man, that had nothing to do with police. But that compounded on top of the Michael Brown, everything just kind of blew up. And so at this point, you would go to the store after you get off shift if you had anything police on. Man, that stuff would come off because you didn't want anybody to know. Just because of animosity, you'd walk by somebody, if they saw your cop, they go, oh, hands up, don't shoot. And you're going, oh my gosh, this is as bad as when you're out and the mom goes, tell my kid straighten up or I'm going to have you arrest him. And I'm going, no, we don't do that. You're planting these seeds in these kids'
what a terrible
head.
message.
So 2015, all that was popping off and there was a lot of pressure from these groups. That's when Black Lives Matter took off. And so it was simple stuff like when you stopped somebody, there was 2 different colored cards you had to give them to justify why we were out doing what we were doing. Instead of just saying, man, you committed.
Like a business card?
They were like printed out, 4x6 cards with information on it. If they wanted to complain, it had a number on it and all this crazy stuff. And they were like, everybody you stop, you got to give this to. And then it was stuff like Broadway is our main street in the West End that divides. It's a 4-lane inner city street, but it's the main street where all the shops are on and all that. And we had a really hot spot down at 35th and Broadway. I mean, constantly getting shooters, constantly getting guns. And when this crew came in, they set up, they met with community leaders or community activists, and they agreed to certain areas we would go and areas we wouldn't go. And I'm like, why are you letting citizens dictate where we go as police officers? We should be able to look at the crime maps and the data and say, we're just going to go solve crime. Why don't we just do that? That's our job. It's not all this other stuff. And all this noise was happening around us. And so now we had on Broadway, we could operate between this block and this block, but just on the north side of it. We couldn't go on the south side of the street.
Like you could not physically go on the south side?
Yeah, they did not want us doing any enforcement in certain areas.
Who's they?
Our bosses at the time.
Okay.
That come from the chief's office. And so there were several incidents where, like, we stopped a group of guys on the south side of Broadway at 35th Street. And 35th is known for, it had a lot of shooters on it. So we stopped a group over here. We got some guns. We got some dope, locked some people up. We get back. Our boss chews us out for being on the wrong side of the street. And I'm going, at this point, I'm like, well, this is insanity. This is so stupid. They're not paying me to go on a certain side of the street. They're paying me to solve crime. And then we had a couple different search warrants, one where we knew a bunch of drugs had come into this house, but because it was out of our operating area, we couldn't do it. And so we kind of manipulated that through another boss to at least let our lead detective that had the case go on it, but nobody else was allowed to go with him. He had to find other people from that division, other flex units to help him. So they did, and they were short on bodies.
Yeah.
And while they were standing on the porch after they had gone in the house and got people secure, come back out on the porch, they had a drive-by on their house where they were at. So they're all hitting the deck. These guys shooting. They go chase the car. They lose him. But just safety issues started to pop up because of this.
Are the citizens of this city being informed about these restrictions and regulations that are being levied upon you?
No.
So these are internal. Are they writing this thing down, or is this like passed down word of mouth?
Word of mouth. Yeah, no, they're smart enough not to put this stuff on paper. Now, they may have had an agreement with these activists, like I said, that they met with. I don't know. I wasn't privy to that. Then there was a couple other cases. Like one, we do a warrant. We're not supposed to be in this area, but I made the call because this dude was a bad dude, and we knew it. So as the door comes open, I'm first one in. I come around the corner. He's got a gun in his hand, and he kind of looks at me, and he turns and runs. He throws it in the trash can, gets out. We get him. We take the gun to ATF. They run it. It comes back. It was part of a homicide like 2 weeks earlier. And so we got in trouble for that one. And I'm thinking, what more do you want? You know, what? So I finally said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And so I checked out of that. And fortunately,
were you the only one who was feeling like this?
Oh,
or was
no.
This a sentiment
the entire unit was just up to here. But a lot of guys aren't willing to go, let me out. I'll go back, put a uniform on. Because you're in plain clothes. You're in an unmarked car. You've got a lot of freedom. But now they're telling us when to take lunch, when to be back. Just silly stuff that just doesn't work with this type of guys that are willing to go out there and you know, be the bush burners. And so I left that unit at the end of 2015, and one of my friends was a lieutenant in another division that was going to have a vacancy in her flex unit as a sergeant. So when I left there, I went to that unit. I went to the street for like 2 weeks in uniform, and then I went to that division, went to that unit on flex. Did that for about a year. After they changed all the dynamics from the unit I left, crime started coming up pretty quick. You could just the numbers started compiling really high, because a big number in Louisville used to be like 60, 70, 80 homicides. This past year,
talking about per year.
Yeah, this past year we had almost 200. It's just gone up that much, and so I went to the flex unit there. We did it for about a year, and our chief, everything they did was like super knee jerk. You know, if anything came down, instead of getting input from the people who were out doing stuff, it was instant knee jerk. Oh man, this happened. All right, do away with that unit. Get rid of this, change that. And all very political. So they got rid of all the flex units, and they decided to beef up narcotics, which is where I always wanted to go anyway. My goal was always to get in our major narcotics unit. And so in November of 2016, I went to narcotics, and I was over a street platoon, which was the lower level narcotics dealers. We get the complaints that the flex units used to get for the different areas. And so we go out there and do warrants. I mean, it was nonstop, 2-3 warrants a day. Boom, 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 boom. Just go, 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 nonstop. A couple of years later, I went to our major case unit, which is long-term investigations with wiretaps. And we had 3 DEA task force officers, an FBI task force officer. So I was over all of them, plus our interdiction. And I did that for about a year and a half. And previously, in 2017 or 18, the commander of the unit at the time had tried to get me to go to our airport interdiction unit, which it seizes packages coming from UPS, FedEx. Back then it was Postal, DHL, different ones.
You're talking about packages full of drugs?
Oh, yeah. 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 It's the biggest drug mule or carrier in the United States are our different postal carriers.
How aware of that do you think they are?
Oh, they know. But
what type of effort do they put in that into, you know, maybe changing that? I mean, let's talk about the volume of packages per day for one. I mean, it's a huge task.
Well,
obviously.
I can tell you what it is in Louisville, just in UPS. 3 million packages a day come through there.
Holy shit.
We would go out there.
Is there a UPS hub there, though?
It's the main one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's so big.
Yeah.
But we'd go out there once a week, and there was a system we'd use to kind of identify packages that, you know, coming from West Coast or down
Colombia.
down by the border. So we would pull those packages aside that looked funny. Dog would come hit on them. We'd usually end up with like 20 packages in a night because there's a very short time frame you have to pull these packages because some of these, I mean, these companies are like,
especially if you pay for overnight, they're cranking volume.
oh man, it's unreal how these things are such fine-tuned machines, how they work. And so from the time those plane lands, unload, get moved to another plane, goes out or goes to the trucks or whatever, you've got like 2 hours. That's it. And so you're scrambling, man. You're looking, dogs hitting. You got to write a warrant. So
based off the dog's reaction.
Right. Based off the dog's reaction along with the peculiarities of the package. So we'd pull like 20 packages a night, and we would fill a table like this full of drugs, probably this high, just off 20 packages out of 3 million.
What percentage of
the ones we
total
pull
transferring through in that day do you think you guys got a hold of?
Impossible to tell.
What would you estimate it as? If you could fill this table up, what percentage of the overall weight that was moving through there per day do you guys think you grabbed?
1%, 2%. I mean, if you just go by sheer numbers, even if you did the math on it, I mean, because 20 out of 3 million is 0.00000.
Yeah, there's a lot of zeros after the decimal.
If you just bumped it up a couple zeros, look how much more you've got. I mean,
so not that this would be reasonable. Well, maybe it would be reasonable for them if they actually wanted to make a difference. Other people's expectations would have to be changed about the velocity that things could make it to them. But if they slowed their system down and actually allowed for detection on the way through, I feel like that actually might make a difference.
It could.
Until they obviously shifted to a different methodology, but it would interrupt that at least.
Right. And they're not doing anything malicious. Let me put that out there.
Yeah, no, they're trying to pay their bills.
Right. They're a business. They're making money. And it would be almost impossible because, somebody comes and drops a box at a UPS store. Number one, those UPS stores are all independent, most of them.
Yeah.
They have both.
That's how they are here, yeah.
But they're independent. So now you've got to tell this, 20-year-old customer guy taking boxes from people what to look out for. He don't have a clue.
I just say have a fleet of dogs at the hub.
That would be cool. Yeah, they've got in Indianapolis. They got a big one with FedEx that they get a ton of. They get more than we ever got because they have all kind of agencies combined with several dogs, and it's pretty neat. And these places are going to be mad I'm even saying that because they didn't want their name on any paperwork, which is understandable. But again, it's not their fault.
I get that, but I mean, I had heard about it peripherally anyway because I love Netflix documentaries, and there was one. This was overseas, but he set up a website and was just mailing people drugs, and he would just drop them off because they would have like remote places you could go drop packages. He's like, yeah, roger that, and he would just drop it off. Yeah, and they would catch a lot of the packages, but they didn't know who had dropped it off.
That's where I'm going with this. So this plays into Breonna Taylor because the package, one of the big holdups or one of the big things that caused a problem after all this came out was one of the statements in the warrant by the detective who did it. So in January, this detective comes to me and says, "Hey, can you look up this name and this address through Postal, which is United States Postal Service?" We don't have a relationship with Postal anymore. A couple of years prior to me coming on, there was a big rift with LMPD and Postal. And instead of being adults and working it out, they just ticked off at each other and they won't, you're not doing business with me, we're not doing business with you. Okay.
They picked up their toys and left.
Yes. And so a neighboring agency, a smaller agency, attached themselves to them because let's be honest, it makes you look good stat-wise, and there's money to be made because when you're intercepting the drug money, you get a piece of it. And
the department does, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in our case, the city does, and then the department gets a little pinch of that. They get little crumbs left over of whatever the mayor wants to do with those discretionary funds. So I said, man, I have zero contact with Postal. Don't even know them. I said they were gone way before I came here, but I can reach out to the guys that do and see if they do. Shot them a text. Hey, do you know this guy's name? Jamarcus Glover, 3003 Springfield, Apartment 4. Do you have anything on it? They responded, we're working at Glover. We think it's the same one. We'll get back with you and let you know. I showed him the text. We talked about it. Boom, gone. About a week later, I was out at UPS and ran into one of those guys because he was doing parking lot security. I said, man, did you ever get anything on that Glover thing? He said, yeah, I've already talked to the female detective on the case, and we were comparing vehicles, and ours was a J Glover, but it wasn't Jamarcus. It was like Joseph Glover or something. So the odds of, it's just a weird coincidence. So he said, I told her it wasn't it. So I went back to the office the next day. I run into the detective past me. I said, hey, I talked to the detective from Shively last night. And he said, not the same Glover. And he looked at me and said, yeah, the girl's name's Kelly told me. And he said, shoot, now I've got to write all these warrants. I was hoping to just do a rip or reversal, which is simply you let the package get delivered, you wait to see who picks it up, you know, you come in on them, or you write a warrant on the house that they're in, and you go in and get them that way. So it was relayed to him that there was nothing there, but later on in the warrant, I don't know if he forgot to take the line out. I'm assuming he did because he'd been preparing these for 2.5 months. So what you do is you build your shell of your warrant, and you start, as you get different information, you plug it in, because we as humans, unless you're taking awesome notes, you're going to forget some stuff. So you're building these warrants as you go along inside the four corners of it on your PC. And I'm thinking what he did is, after the original conversation, when they said, we think we got this same Glover, he put in there, how did he word it? I verified through the postal inspector that suspicious packages were coming to this location, and Jamarcus Glover was picking them up, because they did have a picture of him bringing packages out.
Yeah.
So he's definitely picking packages up from her. So in May, this gets released. The postal inspector comes out, who's the same one that cannot stand LMPD. So I think he found his shot and he took it. And he said, nope, that was never verified to me of suspicious packages. So there's a difference in, are you getting packages or are you getting suspicious packages? And those are hard to tell if you've never seen them, if they're suspicious or not. So why he would say no suspicious packages, and just saying, instead of saying, yes, he was getting packages, but we had no intel saying they were suspicious. Mm-hmm. You know, that'd have been a lot better way to say it. So I think he forgot to take it out of the warrant. I don't know what his intent was. Have no idea. I know this guy. We're friendly, but we're not friends. I've never done anything with him outside of work. And so this became a big sticking point. But going back to what you were saying a minute ago, we all know, if you've done this, that if I'm having dope sent to me, number one, it's not coming to my house. It's going to either go to some girl that I've hooked up with, or a lot of them do vacant properties, and it's coming to some crazy name, Colonel Sanders, or so, you know, it's always something stupid. So
I'd be a retired Army guy living there. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. So
I mean, if you had it delivered directly to your house under your name, I don't think you're
not very good at your
criminal
job.
Career is going to be measured in years.
Right. And Jamarcus is a career criminal. He had, I think at the time of this shooting, he had 5 or 6 felony cases in court for drugs and guns. So he was a career criminal, but he kept getting caught. So he wasn't great at it, but he also knew that nothing was going to happen to him if he got caught. So
how did he arrive at that headspace? I mean, 5 or 6 felony drug charges. How is that individual still walking around in conduct of the drug trade?
Well, we're a very liberal city. Jefferson County is. Our judges tend to let people out. I mean, raise your hand, promise you won't do this again. You know, we'll add some more probation time to you. There's no accountability. And, you know, I've looked at the last probably 20 cases of police-involved shootings, and I bet 90% of them would never have taken place had the person they ended up dealing with had been held accountable for the crimes. They were either on probation, had just been let out, should have been locked up. They're back on the street because majority of society ain't bad. You know, you're dealing with the same group of people over and over and over. And eventually, if you've been on long enough, then you deal with their son or their daughter.
Yeah, generationally.
Yeah. So you've got all these, you're going out risking your life. You're putting people in jail, and the judge releases them, and there's no accountability. And you're like, man, why am I doing this? This is asinine. I keep doing the same thing with the same results, and nothing's changing. If Glover had been in jail on March 13th, we would have never served any of those warrants. And if you've got 5 pending cases, you shouldn't be out. If you just keep doing this to the system. I mean, he was just locked up in January, and Breonna bailed him out. So I don't know the answer to that except for vote these judges out, because I don't know how it is here, but on the judges' races, you don't know who they are. It's not like Congress and Senate and mayor, and where they get out and they do all these big, you know, heavy campaigns. Most of it's done off name recognition. So if Mattingly's been a judge for 6 years or 8 years, and you've heard that name over and over and over, seen it in the paper, you go to the polls and you go, well, it's Mattingly or Dumas. Who am I going to pick? I've heard let's do Mattingly.
Yeah.
He's already a judge. He must be decent. And that's how that plays out. So we kind of need an independent group, kind of like the fact checkers that go around and go, hey, here was Mattingly's record over these last 4 years. He let 350 career criminals out, and 295 of them recommitted within 6 months. Then they let them out again. Show their accountability. But there's no feet held to the fire here. And then it costs taxpayers, it costs cities, it costs lives, and it's just ridiculous.
So were you in that major crimes unit when you were involved with the Breonna Taylor incident?
No, I had just switched in September of 19. I had just gone over to the Parcel interdiction unit. I talked to my wife.
So you've been doing that for about 6 months.
Yeah. Now I shadowed the guy for like 3 months before me to get used to the job. I was doing 2 jobs at once. But I talked to my wife and said, look, I'm coming up on 20 years. I can the best with my pensions about 24, 25 years is about when you kind of meet.
You max out on the math.
Yeah. So you should get out. And I said, I've been going nonstop 100 miles an hour for 15 years. Well, actually 20. I mean, on late watch, it was fun too, and you go. But as far as serving warrants, going through doors, it was over 2,000 at this point. I mean, just constant go. Staying up half the night, being out, coming home, getting up, going to court, doing it all over again. It was Groundhog Day.
How many of those 2,000, we'll call it entries or engagements or warrants served, how many of those terminated in you using your firearm?
The very last one.
And I bring that up for a reason because I think, and I suspected that was the case, I think that there's a misconception that police officers are generally out there looking for a reason to use their firearm. And the actual number of officers that end up using their firearm, I think is shockingly low in comparison. Now, as far as, clear and leather and presenting, totally different story.
All day.
Yeah. It's a tool and it's, it has its design purpose. But actually using the gun, I think it goes against a narrative that I have heard often, that there are trigger happy police officers out there, which has just absolutely not been my own personal experience.
Yeah, and there was a couple of times in my career on warrants, I was justified in using deadly force, but like when you operated, you kind of got the feel for stuff, and you kind of knew, there's like black and white, right and wrong, and morally right and wrong. Right. Yeah, like on one, I go up to a door, and we'd honestly made a mistake. As far as, and I wasn't in charge of this when I was a sergeant over a unit, but we had asked another unit to help us because we were short on bodies. It was late. This guy had a bunch of SWAT experience, so I was listening to him. And not saying he was wrong, but I didn't agree with it. So we go up to this side door, and it's got a small porch on it with a rail behind it. So there's not much room for the ram, not much room for maneuvering. And the screen door was locked. If the screen door was unlocked, we were going to go and hit and roll. So we go up, the screen door's locked. We transition to the front door. And I liked the front door because it had the 2 glass panes. You could see your threat inside. You could see all the way through the house. I'm like, fuck, this is perfect. Let's hit the door and let's roll. All of a sudden he calls it off. No. Move back around the side. And I'm, everything in you goes, well, this ain't right. Why are we doing this?
After you had already gone from the side to the front door?
Yeah, we've already made the move. So why are we going back?
Nobody would ever see or hear it.
Yeah. So we go back, and I go up and I grab the screen door. And most of the time on these doors, you give it a real quick pop, and they just pop open.
It's not a bank door.
No.
Sure.
So I did that, wham, and I'm standing there with the handle in my hand, and the door's still shut. So I throw the handle down, I pull my gun back. As soon as I step back, boom, right through the window. Cuts me up. The glass cuts me up. It hits the fence behind me. So barely missed me. Didn't shoot back because I couldn't see through. They had the faux blinds, and so I didn't want to just start, unloading. So we retreated, got behind vehicles, called him out. He came out, which I'm glad I didn't, because where he was standing was a kitchen. Here's the door. There's a wall right here. On the other side of that wall was a baby bed and a woman in bed. And so I'm glad we didn't just unload, because they could have been a victim, just like what happened, a couple of years ago.
Would you have been inside of your standard operating procedures and legal boundaries? Would you have been authorized to return fire?
No, because couldn't see the target.
Okay.
But another one was, I'm behind a guy in a stack. We're going through the house, clearing left, right. As he turns the corner, and you get to understand people's body language without them saying anything. I could see his body language do something different than he normally did. I was like, oh shoot! So I go low and come around the corner. There's a guy there with a gun, and he's bringing it. But fortunately, he was confused. It was an older guy. Boom! The house had just been hit.
Yeah,
he didn't know what he was doing, but you could tell the intent, or just that feeling. There's split-second decisions, but you're like, no. Then boom, he drops it. So we were good. So there's been several, and even from that, there's been a ton, over 21 years of things that You could have done it, but it wasn't necessary.
Yeah. Before we get into the incident that your book is based around, I want to talk about the warrant process and what is actually required. And if you could unpack for me what is actually required to get a warrant.
Okay. I will say this: different judges are different on how particular they are.
Like, so broadly, like not necessarily specifically, but to actually, if you were to go in front of a judge and expect them to sign off on the warrant, what is it that they're looking to see?
I've got to have enough probable cause, not just suspicion. I've got to have evidence saying, I watched a car pull up, go inside this house, comes back out, we stop him, he has drugs, he admitted he bought it from him. Then you take an informant, you send him into that house. You've got to have enough probable cause to say these things happen and this is how they happen, and this is a guarantee. Not guaranteed you'll find something in the house, but this is what's taking place there. So it all comes around probable cause, and there's several ways you can get that. You can get that through firsthand knowledge. You can get it through other police officers. You can get it through surveillance. You can do it through controlled buys, but you generally have to have more than one of those things. It's got to be like I can't just go on a partner's word and say, yeah, they're selling drugs out of there. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now that might be part of the whole thing. You know, that might be a start of your investigation, but then you've got to follow that up. You can do trash pulls to see if you get stuff out where they've just dispensed it. But again, a trash pull on itself, you don't want to use that just for the warrant, because then later on, well, maybe the neighbor threw his trash into their trash can because he didn't want trash pulled off his. So there's several things that you do to make sure that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. And probable cause is the main thing you've got to have.
What does a warrant allow you to do?
Depends on what you're searching for. So in there, you've got to write specifics of what you're doing. You know, if you're just there for electronics, you pull the electronics and you roll. If you're there for drugs, anywhere on that warrant or anywhere in that house that a drug can be hidden or a gun, you're allowed to search. So, drawers get dumped, beds get flipped. You go in crawl spaces in attics, and all these things. And so I don't forget later, that was one of the things that happened that night. And all these stories you see, well, no drugs or money were found in Breonna Taylor's house. Well, nobody searched. So when Narcotics executed the warrant, the shots took place. We never went in the house. We pulled back, and our public integrity unit came in. They're the ones that investigate police shootings. And what they do is they secure the scene. They write their own warrant so they can collect evidence and do the ballistics and the processing and all the charts that they need to do. And they do a cursory sweep, right? They'll make sure nobody's there, make sure nothing's out that can harm them in the way, but they're not getting in attics. They're not looking behind water heaters and under beds.
They're just making sure that the location is secure.
Right. And they're collecting any evidence that's associated to the warrant they have. Again, you talked about what can you do in their warrant. That's what they can do. They can collect evidence that they applied for, as far as the shell casings, the cutting parts of the drywall out if they need to, if it's got evidence, carpet squares, whatever they need to do. But it doesn't entail going in attics and flipping beds and doing all the things and going in shoe boxes, which is where a lot of money or drugs is held. You got a lot of drug dealers have a wall of 100 shoes, and you're like, oh man, you walk and you see that and you go, crap. See, who's getting the shoes today? Because I don't want them. Because you got to go through every single shoe. Yeah, and it's just a hassle. So that's what took place that night, and there was no searching done because it didn't fit the parameters of their warrant. And then when the person in that unit called at 7:30 in the morning, when that unit was leaving, when they wrapped up, they said, can we go search? And they were told, no. Close the scene down, we're done.
Why would they be told no?
I think it was an accident because the person that told them is a friend of mine, and I think there was so much going on, and it should have been what probably should have happened was somebody that wasn't directly connected should have been kind of placed in charge of that. And that's some stuff that we're addressing after the fact to go, hey, in the future, can these protocols be put in place so these things aren't missed? Because that's a lot of this case had to do with missteps. And you can have a misstep or two on a case, but on a major national or worldwide case, you can't have 5 or 6 missteps because it just looks sloppy. Yeah. It looks like cover up. All the things that you're feeding into the narrative, whether you mean to or not, it's accidentally happening. And they'll take that and twist it and turn it and make you look like just total incompetent.
What does a warrant not allow you to do? What are the limitations?
So when you go in a house, if I go in a house, like there's this big one in Minneapolis right now, right? Have you followed that one at all? It was the three guys shot. They killed somebody. And so Minneapolis police had a search warrant for 3 different places
Okay.
to try to find these guys because they were all attached to these 3 places.
Is this a young black man?
Underneath the blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they used a no-knock because when you're going after a murder suspect, hey, I'm here at the door, please come out or don't shoot me, please. There's a place for no-knocks, and that's one of them. You want that surprise out, that element of surprise. So they go in, they use a key, they go in, but after they're in, and even on no-knocks, this is just the protocol. Even if it's a no-knock and you ram the door, you're still yelling police. You're just not giving that advance warning.
No knock and no, what do you guys call it? Announce are very different things.
Yes.
Can you get a warrant where you don't have to announce, or is that a requirement of the job?
That's a question I don't know. I know even our SWAT team, when they do no-knocks, there's always announcement.
Every police training environment that I've been around where they're doing clearance, they are yelling like police. And
everybody does.
And in the world that I came from, I'm sitting there thinking, you guys are out of your fucking minds.
Yeah, because you all sneak up and do your job and get out.
I mean, we're not even necessarily sneaking up, but, you could try to be as sneaky as you want or as loud as you want, but audibly letting people know where you are in a room, I hope that people understand, like, that gives away the tactical advantage.
Right.
And that not that everybody would try to take advantage of that, but there's a very distinct difference between being required to do that and having the ability to not. Given the choice, I'm like, the U.S. Navy's here. U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that shit.
And again, I don't know the answer to that. 21 years, I've never heard anybody even ask that because that's just what
I think it's a requirement.
It's just what we did.
I think it's a requirement to. Well,
I felt safer doing it because
yeah.
Because if somebody just came in my house and opened my door,
Correct.
and I didn't hear them, I'd be like, oh. But if I'm hearing police search warrant, police search warrant, police search warrant, then they get to my room, police search warrant, you still have somewhat of a psychological advantage because 3 or 4 seconds is different than a minute.
Yeah.
People are still scrambling, trying to, oh my gosh, what the heck's happening? Trying to get their gun, trying to get their clothes on, trying to do whatever. We gave way too much time on this warrant. We locked for almost a minute, letting them know we were here. Police search warrant, open the door. Police search warrant, open the door.
So you guys were not on a no-knock warrant?
No. It was signed as a no-knock. So Glover, because of his history with guns and fleeing police, they got a no-knock for him and his partners. Since this was one of the houses, it was requested of them get a no-knock for all of them. They had a ping and a tracker on they had a tracker on his car, a ping on his phone. So they knew where he was at. And what happened is this didn't play, once they knew he was not going to be on Springfield, the no-knock it didn't fit the elements of it. Mm-hmm. There's certain parameters that you have to have for a no-knock. Now, could we have done it because it was signed by a judge? Yes. Was it, again, the right thing to do? No, because it did not fit those elements.
Is the no-knock justified due to the enhanced risk to the officers?
Yes.
It reaches a certain threshold, so they'll provide you that protection.
Correct.
Okay.
So on that night, we were in the roll call room, and we're briefing this. There's 40, 50 guys in there, and they're updating on the tracker and his ping. Okay, he's at this location. All right, looks like he's heading down toward Elliott, which was that was their goal anyway. They wanted to get him on Elliott, but just in case he was out in Springfield, they went ahead and got the no-knock for that one also.
So when you reference those names, you're talking about the streets that houses run?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So when we go in the room, I always took a picture of the board just to make sure if I need to reference back to it when we're on scene or whatever, in case, because I don't have a photographic memory. That's why I'm a cop. And so I had taken a picture of it, and fortunately I did because this one actually said knock and announce on theirs. The rest of them said no knock. Even though the warrant was signed as a no knock, we were told knock and announce because now it doesn't fit this element. Okay, no problem. I agree with it. It doesn't fit the element. The thing I didn't agree with was, and I should have just gone with my gut because every time I go against my gut, something happens, it seems like. They said, give her extra long to come to the door because she's a heavy-set black female. Okay, we can do that. Wouldn't have done it had we known there was a guy inside with her. But the intelligence wasn't there enough to do that. And we know that. Well, I mean, that's why my brain was going, this isn't right. Because no matter what you think there's always some surprise. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not as bad as you think, and sometimes it's worse than you think. So that night, even though we had a signed no knock, we knocked and announced. And not only did we knock and announce, normally knock and announce is 5 to 10 seconds. Boom, 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 boom. Police search warrant. Boom, boom, boom. Police search warrant. boom, you're in. You're going, because you don't want to give them too much. Like I said earlier, it gives them too much time to prepare, think of a formulated plan, and you just don't want that.
Is there a set time you actually have to wait? Is that
the Supreme Court says a reasonable amount of time. Our department now has said 10 seconds.
Okay.
I think before it was 5 to 10. That's what we were always taught. Whether that was correct or not, I never personally dug into it. I think the Supreme Court they left it kind of open. It said a reasonable amount of time.
That's good, but also problematic.
Yes. Gives them an out.
Yeah, but it could also be, you could say, somebody could say, well, I think 1 second is reasonable. You could play both sides of that coin. It'd be better off if they maybe sat a few people down and blind study 100 people.
Yeah.
What's a reasonable amount of time?
Right. Or go to a door and you do it and see what the reasonable amount of time is.
10 seconds and under. It's between 5 to 10. To me, God, that's still a long time at the threshold of the door. But I can see where that would be justified as reasonable.
Right, because we did have, over the course of my career, we did have plenty of people come to the door and open. And we thought we had somebody coming that night. So after like the fifth cadence of banging on the door and yelling police, the guy with the ram is standing to the right of the door. Nobody's in front of the door. I'm to the left. He's to the right. And he goes, man, I hear somebody inside. So we stop. We listen. I didn't hear anything, but I yelled again. Police search warrant. If you're there, open the door. We got a warrant for your house, blah, blah, blah. Didn't hear anything. Knocked and banged, announced one more time. Looked back at my lieutenant, and he was like, go for it. So hit the door.
Before we get into what happened there, can you explain the case broadly and all of the players that were kind of involved and what led you guys to that being at the door knocking?
I can tell you what I know.
Okay.
The only part I played in this case entirely was that text message and then relaying that one question.
Okay.
I didn't know the players. I saw the assistant chiefs, like 3 of them would come in. I think it was on Mondays, and a representative from the mayor's office would come in, and they would meet with this group these detectives and their bosses, and go over plans. So what was brought to light during the lawsuits was a gentrification of this area down on Elliott, this 2-block area. And the city's goal was to go in, eventually get all these houses, clear the land out, and build a whole new environment. And the plans have been drawn up for a couple of years. There's a map I've got that shows which houses they've already gotten, which houses they need. Because what they were doing is they were going in, and if you get so many infractions on a specific address, you can do what's called a nuisance abatement. And the city can basically come in and take your house.
No shit.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And they had bought the other houses for like $1. I think at the end of the day, after all this incident, they bought that house for $1 because they have to have some kind of transaction.
Yeah.
And so that was the goal. That's why all these meetings were taking place. I didn't know that. The guys involved didn't understand the whole dynamics of it, because it wasn't, hey, so we can build this. The mayor's office was only presenting it as, man, we're getting a lot of complaints. We got to do something about the crime here. There's a lot of crime in this area. All these good people here, they want this block cleaned up. That wasn't the case. The case was the mayor wanted this. He had certain developers that he used on other things that may have been related. It was all this shell game going on to fill people's pockets. And so that's what brought
attention to the area.
To that area. Yeah, because this unit that they developed was developed in either December of 19 or January of 20 of these detectives. Because eventually the unit I left, Viper unit, was turned into Mobile 9th Division. They had a bunch of complaints in different areas. The good guys there. They were just young. They took the experience. All the experienced guys left. They were like, screw this, we're out of here. And a bunch of young, aggressive officers, but again, just didn't have the experience, or didn't have the experienced people around them kind of guiding them. Like you said earlier, the guy grabbing your belt loop going, oh, don't do that, it's stupid. So all of a sudden, this group has a ton of lawsuits going on, a lot of complaints.
Lawsuits back towards the police department,
yes,
you mean? Okay.
Right, for things they did. Whether they were right or wrong, I don't know, because people are so happy. So they dissolved that unit completely, just did away with it. And they brought some of them over to Narcotics and formed this new unit from a plan they had gotten from Chicago called Place-Based Unit. They were going to go after specific places that were target areas, that were a problem area, and that's all they were going to focus on. I think there were 6 of them on the unit. Well, the guy that wrote all these warrants had the most experience of the group. but he didn't have experience writing multiple warrants because this was 5 or 6 houses they ended up writing. And that's not an easy job when you're trying to coordinate all that with pole cams and trackers and pings, and you're trying to corral all your guys together. And they did a good job on it. I mean, they collected a lot of good stuff on this case. But the experience just wasn't quite there. So that's what brought us to that house that night. And earlier, like I said, this Jamarcus Glover and another guy named Adrian Walker, that was his partner. Now, Adrian ended up getting murdered during all these protests. Somebody just came up and put one in his head. I've got my theories behind that, but there's no substance to it because originally Jamarcus Glover was going to cooperate with the district attorney because with all the pressure of, Breonna Taylor losing her life and her family and the attorneys going, well, she had nothing to do with this. She was just an innocent girl going to be a nurse, which she wasn't in nursing school, but she was just an innocent girl going to be a nurse. And y'all came in and executed her. So they had talked to Glover and he was going to say, well, yeah, she held my money. She was part of the group. She didn't sell the dope, but she was part of the group. And she held other people's money, not just his. And at the last minute, they had already drawn up the agreement, all that, given it to his lawyer. And at the last minute, somebody got to him because he was like, oh, never mind, I'm not doing that. And I don't blame him because the group that her mom runs with is some black motorcycle clubs.
Breonna Taylor's mom?
Yeah. And there's some bad dudes. They move guns and drugs, and they got several bodies under them. And her mom is part of that organization. She was dating the vice president of it. And so I don't know if Adrian Walker was going to cooperate. I don't know. He's dead, so he can't tell us. But that's kind of how they got there. The city pushed them to that direction, said, we want this.
And, I like when we first started talking, when I was talking about your description of the incident, the Breonna Taylor incident, it shows you either a blind spot of my own that I either didn't register it, but I was under the impression that law enforcement was not aware that she was there.
Yeah. That was just one of the so initially the thing that drives me craziest the most about this case was from day one, the attorneys and the media, mainly her attorneys, were putting out all this stuff. The original press conference said, well, she didn't even know Glover. Well, they've been dating for 3 years. Everything was registered to her house. And the first statement was, well, they didn't even know each other. And then it went from that to, well, they used to date. And then then they came out and said her name wasn't on the warrant. The house wasn't on the warrant. We hit the wrong place. Glover was already in custody. We killed her in her bed. All those are lies. And it's so easily refuted without compromising the investigation.
Is it still ongoing?
With the DOJ, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the state charges are all taken care of, but the Department of Justice is still investigating. And all they had to do was say, oh, wait a minute, here's the warrant. No, her name's on it. No, she wasn't shot in her bed. She actually passed in the hallway. Glover was not arrested before her. These were simultaneous warrants. He was taken into custody at the same time all this was going down. Everything's registered to her house. They could have said all that without compromising the shooting investigation. It had nothing to do with it. And they didn't, and they still haven't almost 2 years later. They still have not refuted any of the lies. There was rumors going around because of one of the pictures. There's a little red gallon gas can inside the door, and somebody that with a little bit of juice put it out there that we brought the trash can after we executed them and stole their money. We were going to torch the house, and I'm thinking, what's the logic behind that? We were just in a brief with 50 guys who knew exactly where we were going. Why would we go rob them of money and torch? It just makes no sense. But people believed it and they ran with it, and the city never said, or the police department never got up and said, not true, not true. Matter of fact, the mayor would get up and go, we need to get justice for Breonna Taylor. We got to get justice. If I could fire the officers, I would, but they're protected under the police officers' Bill of Rights. So I can't do it until due process.
Did the mayor say that? Oh, okay. So the mayor said that before the investigation on the shooting had been complete.
Yeah. And the thing that I went to him and said, hey, can you release the truth? That's all we want. Just release the truth. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me. Release the truth. And they said, no, we can't because that goes against protocol. So if we do it now, we'll have to do it on the next investigation. And I said, so you want our city to burn over protocol? You change protocol all the time whenever they want. Whatever benefits them, it gets changed. But for some reason, he dug his heels in. Later on, we found out probably because he didn't want the gentrification stuff revealed that they were the ones targeting Elliott, that they were the ones that put the police on Elliott. Not the police just didn't go, hey man, there's a lot of dope dealing going on the street. Let's go for that. No, they were pushed. Take care of this. Take care of this. Take care of this. Yeah.
So how did it play out from when you guys left that? I'm assuming it happened in the same night, that briefing room, until when you're standing in front of the door. I'll just let you kind of.
Okay, so we briefed at 10 o'clock. I had been out at FedEx before that. I come in straight from FedEx to there. And again, one of the rumors that one of the attorneys put out was that we were out drinking before the warrant. I'm like, there's video and a sign-in sheet at FedEx. All this is easily to go, you're so full of crap, but nobody ever did. And we were under gag orders, so we couldn't respond to any of this stuff. So after the brief come outside, it had started raining at this point, and I run into Tony James, and he's like, hey, Sarge, I've got a ballistic shield in my car. Do you want me to bring it? Well, we didn't train on ballistic shields. We weren't assigned them. They didn't take us to any classes. I'd used them a few times when there's like a pit bull or something, but that just wasn't a tool I was comfortable with or that we used. That was what SWAT did. And I said, sure, bring it. Well, I go out to my car, and I've got 2 flat tires on my driver's side, front and back. The car behind me had a couple flat tires, so somebody must have walked through the parking lot and poked some tires. I was like, oh, crap, man, I've got to be out on this, meet up with these guys in like 30 minutes. So I've got to hurry because SWAT was planning on rolling at midnight. By this time, it's almost 11 o'clock. So I run in, I get the tools, the ram and the pick, and I come out and I see these flat tires. I'm like, crap. So I go in, I find a pool car. It's some junky car that, it's pouring down rain by this time. I'm taking my gear out of one, putting it in the other, soaking wet, and I'm ticked off, and jump in the car, and I get out there. So when I get there on scene, I pull up, and there's a EMS wagon right here. And I pull up beside it, and they didn't see me pull up. There's a black guy and a white guy. Black guy has dreads in his hair. He's got headphones on like these. And I'm sitting there trying to get their attention. I take my flashlight and hit him. He looks at me. He tries to take his headset off, and it's stuck in his braids, and he can't get them off. Finally, he gets them off, and the white kid's over here on his phone, and they're both young. I mean, they look like younger than my kids, my adult children. I'm like, oh, crap. I remember saying, I hope these guys don't have to save my life. And
I'm assuming this was slightly off-site, too. I mean, you're not meeting up directly in front of your target
No,
house.
we're about a mile away. Okay. We're about a mile away in a church parking lot.
To make sure you guys are doing this all right.
Yeah. So he gets his headphones off, and the other kid pays attention. I'm like, hey, you here for us? And he's like, yeah. I was like, all right, hopefully we won't need you. Just sit tight. I'll let you know when we're leaving. Cool. I leave there. I go by the apartment that we're doing because I hadn't been by it because, again, we had no part in this investigation. I just had an address. So I pull up, and there's a gate, like a 10-foot gate or 8-foot gate, but it's really wide, and it's blocking the entrance from the subdivision to this apartment complex. I'm like, man, I wasn't told about this at the brief. So I go out, I find another way in. You got to go around the backside, circle all the way around and come up to it. So I call the guy that's got the eye. He's parked in the parking lot somewhere on the eye, and I said, hey, I'm pulling through. When I get to where I'm at, I said, what am I looking for? Well, it was I think it was a Roto-Rooter van sitting there, some kind of plumbing van, sitting right in front of the sidewalk that leads up to their apartment. So when you're looking at these apartments, it's the typical 2-story, 4 down low, 4 up high. Mm-hmm. There's a metal staircase that goes up to the right. Her door is right directly underneath the staircase, number 4. So I said, when I get up to the building, let me know and tell me which door it is. So I pull it, and he goes, it's right there. And I look, and I can see it. And he said, it's the bottom right-hand door, number 4. So, okay, I got it. So I leave, and I go back. We do our second little brief. I tell the guys, what's going on. And I reached down, and I went, oh, crap. I left my extra mag pouch in the door of my car. I moved everything, and it was pouring down rain. I was in a hurry. And I said, well, I hope if I got to shoot somebody, I hope it's these 16 work. And, so now I'm saying all these stupid things like, oh, I hope you don't have to do me. I have to use these 16. It was getting ready to turn Friday 13th. There's a full moon out. I mean, just all these things that are kind of falling into place. And so we roll out. We get up, we come around, and as I'm pulling up to the house, there's a Toyota Sequoia sitting there now that wasn't there when we pulled through. And all the cars are faced perpendicular to the building in their parking spot. Well, this was parallel outside of the parking spots, and it was right in front of the door. I'm thinking, oh, crap, I wonder if this guy or this person went into our apartment, and now we have no idea. So automatically your awareness goes up a little bit, and I was a little ticked off because the eye missed it. And I was like, who's in this car? I don't know.
I'm assuming by the eye you mean somebody
Yes.
surveillance?
Right. Somebody
Okay.
sitting there watching. And it was raining and dark. So, give him the benefit of the doubt. Police is a good friend of mine. If he messed up, he messed up.
Did he have night vision goggles? I mean, there's ways that you can get around this.
No, they don't supply that stuff. We're talking about police department, not military.
Well, shit, get a mono instead of a bino.
something.
Get some PVS 18s.
And so I clear that car and I go up to the door. Those guys file in on the sidewalk. They come up.
How many total did you have with you?
7.
Okay.
Yeah, 7. And so I'm at the front door. Mike's to the right. Tony's behind me. At this point, with all that's going on, I totally forgot he had a ballistic shield. That's on me. He had it with him. I forgot he had it. And I never looked at him because when I went up, my focus was on the door, and then I canted beside the door. And the first time I banged, a guy popped out from the upstairs door who we later found out was the owner of the Sequoia. He was there to pick a kid up that the babysitter was watching.
Oh, he had just gone up the stairs
Yeah.
instead of into the
Right.
downstairs. Gotcha.
So I bang on the door. He pops out, and I hear Brett Hankerson and our lieutenant address him. Get back in the house, get back in the house, get back in the house. They put a gun on him because they don't know who this is popping out.
And you guys are knocking and saying search warrant? Or
At this point, we hadn't said search warrant yet.
were you saying police?
No, the first 2 knocks, we were just trying to get her to quietly come to the door, go in, no big deal.
Gotcha.
And but after the second round of knocks, and they're arguing with this guy now. I mean, it's full blown. Finally, I look at Brett and say, let it go. If he's not a threat, let it go. Just focus. So then we start announcing, and then it's the open hand, super hard bang, loud, yelling police search warrant, police search warrant. So after about, like I said earlier, after the 5th cadence of that, Mike says, I hear somebody, we don't hear him, we hit the door. It took him 3 hits to hit the door, and I remember somebody said after his first hit, because he hit it wrong, he hit the deadbolt. It's not going to knock when you hit the deadbolt, it's just going to bend it. And I remember hearing somebody go, my daughter hits harder than that, or, how we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quality, motivational
Yes.
/ degradational statement
Yes.
towards one of your close friends.
Right. So the second time he hits the door, I can see through the door. It's cracked. The deadbolt's bent. I can see the living room. And I said, here it goes. It's going this time. And he hits it and it goes flying open. So I'm able to cut the pie by looking to the right. I can see the living room, come all the way around. I can still remember the color of the couch and the drapes.
Lights are on or off inside?
Off.
Okay.
So I come around that corner. Now it's a quick cut the pie because, you're moving. Now the door's open. And you're yelling police, police. Everybody at this point's yelling police. When I'm first knocking, it's just me announcing. Everybody else is just sitting. So it's kind of like cover contact deal.
So as it opened, you entered. So you guys are kind of
Never entered.
okay.
So the door swings from right to left. I'm on the left side. I clear the living room. Now my visual space runs out because there's a hall here. So from the door frame that I'm on the other side of, I can't see any further. I've got to step down the fatal funnel, right?
Yep.
So I step to the left, and as soon as I step and turn, I'm looking down a hallway about 25, 30 feet, and I can see 2 figures, one tall, one short. They're almost like one. They're like almost overlapping each other. And my mind went, this ain't right. Because generally, you've got either one person you're addressing, somebody running. Most times, somebody running. If they're trying to get out, they're not standing there waiting for you.
So he's just standing at the end of a hallway.
They were just standing there. And as I turn, my mind's going, oh shoot, something's off. And then my eyes go right to the barrel of his gun. I can see it. He's outstretched just like
Full
this.
extension.
Yes. And I could see the barrel of the gun. I could see the silver on it. And by the time it registered, boom, he shot. So I just returned 4 shots. Boom, 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 boom. I step behind the door, and then I come back around and get 2 more off. And by this time, he had dove in. So what people don't understand on the layout of this house, you had a narrow hallway. I mean, it was super narrow. It was probably, I don't know, not even, maybe 3 feet. And there was an inset door at the end of the hall that led to a second bedroom. And so you had this little cutout spot at the end of the hall that their bedroom came out of and this other bedroom came out of. Well, when they're standing there, like I said, she was kind of a big girl. And as soon as he shot and I started to return fire, he dove out of the way behind this wall. Mm-hmm. I think she tried to follow him in and caught the rounds and went down because the way her body was laying with her head up against the wall and her feet closer to that other door, it just kind of showed that. And again, none of this is ever said. No, the layout, how it is. And as I went down, after I shot, I grabbed my leg because I knew I was shot. and I felt it, and I could feel so much blood in my hand. I thought, oh man, I've been through enough, CPR and first aid classes. This isn't just a little through and through in the leg.
Yeah.
And
So he fired one round and hit you with that one round.
Yes. Because he was sitting there waiting, waiting. As soon as the door opened, boom. As soon as I got in the door frame. And so I looked up and said, man, I've been shot. It hit my femoral artery. And so I sat on my butt because I thought, man, I'm pumping blood out. I sat on my rear end. And at this time, Miles had already stepped up and been firing. And for a second, I slid my gun out. I went, what am I doing? I gotta have my gun. But just for that one little second, my mind kind of went, and I came back, and I was like, I got to get out of here. So I got up, hobbled out, got in the parking lot, and I sat down, or I actually fell off the curb because I stepped with my left leg, but it wasn't working. It was all tendon, and the muscle had stopped because it penetrated it. And I went down, and he drugged me out, and I said, man, I need a tourniquet. I got to have a tourniquet. And he didn't have one on him, so he pulled his belt off and he tried. And Mike Nobles comes up and he's stepping on my leg, pulling it, but there's so much blood on the belt, and it's just not.
For people
doing it.
listening, the old belt movie
does
technique,
not work.
It doesn't fucking work.
No,
you need a tourniquet.
Yes.
Sometimes multiple.
And so I'm sitting there looking, and I looked and I said, that ain't working.
Oh yeah, never do that. Never look.
And
never look.
well, I was still calling off. I was still calling off stuff. Like I'm laying there, and it's still the ground's wet, so I'm laying back on the ground, and I hear Brett going, they have a rifle. They have a rifle. Because what he thought he saw after the first shot, he kind of, peeked in.
Quick peek.
And then went around the front because Miles was there. And he thought in his mind he saw a rifle. And there still could have been because nobody searched the house. We have no idea. And we know I got shot with a 9mm and we have that gun. But, and I remember yelling, no, it was a pistol. Because I'm still lucid at this point. I can still hear everything going on. My mind's still working. Yeah. And I just had a lot of pain in my groin and my lower back. So I thought another bullet had lodged up in my groin area. And I'm like, man, give me a knife. I want to cut these pants and see where this hole's at before you put this tourniquet on. Because if you put it below it, it's not going to do any good. And so we get a knife, cut the pants. Somebody brings a tourniquet up. We put it on. And my God, I would take being shot any day over
Hurts.
a tourniquet. Yeah.
Yeah, people don't realize that either. The pressure you actually have to apply with a tourniquet is intense.
Yes, it's no fun.
Yeah.
I can only explain to people, like, take a rubber band, put it around your finger a whole bunch of times and feel that little bit of pain and pressure on your finger.
And then keep wrapping it.
And then do that to a big extremity, and it's no fun.
Stop the bleeding, though, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah, it did.
Considering we're having this conversation.
Yeah, for the most part. So when I got shot, people were like, what went through your mind? It wasn't fear. It wasn't any of that. It was like, I got to get a tourniquet so I live. And then as soon as the tourniquet's going on, I'm thinking, all right, now you got to get me to the hospital so I don't lose this leg. That's what I was thinking. I don't want to lose my leg. I like to live, but I really don't want to lose my leg either.
I think that shooting or being in a gunfight is far less romantic than it is portrayed, and probably people think because of that. And also being shot. I was also shot in the left hip. Far less romantic. Romantic's not a great term for that, actually. Actually, maybe it is. Far less romantic than it's portrayed. Like, people don't go flying through the air.
Right.
It's not you get a grazing shot and you drop dead. Pistols don't knock people over, 55-gallon drums that then go off, and it's just, you don't have to lose, you don't have to, and I would hope that most people or all people who are in that situation, you don't have to lose control of your cognitive awareness or your ability. It's kind of like what you described, like, what's the priority? Stop bleeding. What's the next priority? Get me to the fucking hospital.
Yeah.
So you can still think very critically. I think people are just exposed to a lot of Hollywood scenes of both killing and being on the receiving end. And in my personal experience, it's far, far from those portrayals.
And they're really quick.
Yeah.
I mean, boom, it's over now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when CSI came out when I was, earlier in my career, and they could solve, any crime off of somebody sneezed 3 years ago, and they
only had 44 minutes. Right?
Yeah,
and they got to solve these crimes in between selling Tide and Pepsi.
Yes.
So apparently they had technology that you guys didn't have, and
still
everybody's
don't.
fingerprint is in the database.
Yes. And they do the face scan and it pops up in 2 seconds. And you're like, hey, how'd that work?
Do you mean that
I can't even log on that quick?
Do you mean that not everybody's DNA is in the system?
It's apparently. Well, if you keep giving to Ancestry.com and stuff, then yes, you will be. But yeah, so that misconception of that has bled over in every other area. That shoot him in the leg, that'll do it. Well, it didn't stop me.
You know, I saw that statement, and I'm pretty sure that it was Biden that said that, and I just wish in those moments, because I've heard other people say it than him. It's not an uncommon thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they knew what the fuck they were talking about
Yeah.
before they say that. Shoot them in an area where I'm more likely to miss because the surface area is smaller. And so should I not worry about the rounds that I miss the legs with? Because you're saying it's less dangerous. What if I shatter the pelvic girdle? You know, there's no veins or arteries in there. Oh, and by the way, if I do shatter the pelvic girdle or hit him high enough up in the leg that you can't put a tourniquet on, what do you got for me now? Like,
Yeah.
it's an idiotic statement.
It's very stupid.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, all the news stuff put, officer was shot in the leg with a graze wound, expected full recovery the day after. And I'm like, how do you know full recovery if you don't even know the extent of the wounds?
Yeah.
You know, and everybody's different. My full recovery might take place, but the guy with the same exact injury might be different for him.
Well, when it comes to interacting with portions of your body, it's a matter of millimeters or inches.
Yeah.
I mean, you get it clipped or it severed your artery, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, man, I don't know if people have actually been around an actual arterial bleed. It is unbelievable.
Yeah. It was a lot of blood.
Yeah. And fast.
Yeah.
And, you know, but maybe if it had gotten a vein instead, that's a different flow, right? We're not talking pumping, we're talking seeping. And then if it was a little scratch, you know, maybe it's not going to bleed very much at all, but to the untrained person, those are, you know, you got shot in the leg.
Yeah. So I carry a front pocket wallet, and this was the same brand, same exact wallet I had that night, or same type. And it went through my front leg.
Oh, it hit you that high up.
Yeah. Oh, it's way up here.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank God I wasn't a couple inches over.
The old cock and balls does not stop rounds.
Goodness, no. But it can end your life, even if you live. So it went through here, and the trajectory should have hit my femur, but there's a little metal clip in here that changed the trajectory just enough. It went through the wallet and knocked it just a little left. Now, it did sever my artery, but at least it didn't explode that bone where all the splinters and then
shards.
Then may not have been able to stop the bleeding.
So you were off the threshold of the door pretty quickly.
Yes.
Okay. And then what happened? So as you were off, were they still, how did the rest of the engagement play itself out?
So Miles did what he was taught to do, the guy that stepped up. When I went down, he kind of stepped over me and addressed the threat so I could get out, because that's what we're taught to do. As I'm going out, right to the curb, I hear his fire end. And again, this is all so quick. You know, one of the attorneys said we shot for a minute and a half. I'm like, how do you shoot 30 rounds in a minute and a half? You pow, pow. This was done, you know. And as soon as he stops, I hear another burst of gunfire.
All pistol?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is still going on. What is, who's in there?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what had happened was, so when you're in that hallway, you've got metal and concrete. So every shot is echoing. Every flash, you can't tell if it's coming in or out because it's in the dark. So all you're seeing is flash. And Brett, when he thought he saw a rifle, stepped to the side. He heard me say, I've been shot. He's hearing this rapid gunfire in this echo chamber. And as he gets around the side, he's thinking, my friends are getting executed at that front door. I've got to do something to stop it. I've got to do something to stop the threat. So he put some through the windows. And subsequently, he was charged for wanton endangerment, and that trial's coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Into the windows of the apartment that you guys were receiving fire from.
Right, in the direction that he last saw them.
Okay.
Because he thought, I've got to do something or they're going to die.
Okay.
That was his mindset behind it. I saw a rifle. I'm hearing rapid gunfire. And even Kenneth Walker inside his statement said it sounded like a machine gun going off because, the just the rapid squeezing of the trigger. Yeah, and all the echoes. And so they've been demonized for that, both of them. They both lost their jobs. The guy who stepped over me, cut and dry, should not have lost his job. And if you take into all the elements of Brett, shouldn't have lost his job. And even if you lose your job, that's one thing. But to take criminal charges for trying to save somebody's life who just shot one of you, it just blows my mind. So we'll see where that goes here.
What did they lose their jobs for? What was the justification for that?
So when Miles gave his description of events, he had his auditory and what he saw. He wasn't very good at describing it. I mean, he described what he saw,
Yeah.
but he didn't say what they wanted to hear.
Was it the first gunfight he'd ever been in?
No, he'd shot somebody 6-7 years ago, but it was a totally different situation. It was a car trying to hit him during the day, you know, all that stuff. He's a former Marine, so he's been in all that stuff. I don't know what happened, but he said, and this makes sense because if you see my gun flashes, it's like a strobe light, right? In this dark, boom, 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 you're seeing dark. And so when he stepped up to take over, he saw what he said. It looked like, I forget how he described it, shadowy figures. Because, I mean, I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. It was too dark. You know, people was like, well, you didn't identify your target. Could you have told me who it was that shot you? No, I couldn't have. I could tell you he was taller than the one next to him, but I couldn't. If he was standing in front of me, I wouldn't know who he was until after the fact when they said, this guy did it. And so he also said, I couldn't tell you if I shot one shot or 16. I don't know. I was just shooting until he got out. And so they said he didn't properly identify his target. So they fired him.
Okay. After you were pulled, I'm assuming you ended up in the care of the individual that was on the phone and the guy with the headset on.
Yeah.
So you were probably rapidly removed from the scene, I'm going to assume.
No.
Really?
No.
They just treated you on site?
No. So I don't know where they were. I don't know if they had their headsets back on, didn't hear the radio. I don't know. It took them probably less than a mile away, 12 minutes to get there, 14 minutes, which seemed like forever. I mean, it seemed like an eternity. And what had happened was the responding officer, the first one that came, and this was pretty cool. This is everybody's dream. He pulls up to that side where the fence was, the one I came to first, huge fence. And he started to go around, and I remember Brett yelling on the radio, run through the fence, just come in. So I hear, boom, and it explodes this fence. But it's not like the movies again. It went over, it didn't bust open, it knocked it down, and then it came back up some. So now it's sitting up, 2-3 feet. But he made it through, ripped his light bar off, messed his car up, but he got through, and I'm like, that'd be cool. I wish that was me doing that. And he comes up, and he was great, man. He was a young officer. He had the quick clot and the stuff and got it on, and, he was squared away. So I was appreciative to him. But so EMS comes that same route. And that's, again, my fault I didn't relay to them. If you have to come, because in my mind, they're not coming. This is, easy warrant. We're going to go in, do it, get out. I didn't relay to them that if you look on your map, don't go that way, go this way. So my fault. I'll take blame for it. So they come up to that same fence. So finally when they get there, so they were like, do you want us to just throw you in the car and take you? Because I've always said, if we're close, throw me in the car. Don't wait for EMS. Throw me in the car, get me to the hospital. But I knew they were right there, and I knew we were like 25 minutes from the closest hospital.
Probably better off being in the
I said,
EMS.
I'll wait for EMS. They're right here.
Yeah.
They're like, throw you in the car. I'm like, they're around the corner. They'll be here in a minute. And then the minute, and then 2 minutes, and 3 minutes. So then I'm starting to think, okay, do I need to go in the car? Well, about that time, they're coming. So they bring me up, and it's a good distance from where they stop at this fence to where we are. It's like 2 more long buildings. So I can't walk that, and I don't know if they could carry me that far, I'm sure they could if they, threw me over their shoulder or something. So there was a car parked right there. I got on the trunk of that car. They put me on the trunk of the car. I'm holding on to it. And we're driving down. About that time, I see the white EMS worker walking up with his bag. And then I hear the ambulance backing up, like he was going to go try to find his way around. And I said, where's he going? I yelled this. I'm watching it. He said, he's pulling around. I said, raise him on the radio and tell him to stop. We're coming. We're here now. He said, I did, and he didn't answer. I said, call him again. I may have used a few words in between there. But
colorful language, if you will.
And trying to get his attention. And so he got on the radio. The ambulance stopped. We get to the fence, and my lieutenant scoops me up. I'm like 200 pounds. Then I've got all this gear on, so I'm 220, 240, whatever I am. He carries me around the car, walks me over, climbs over this fence, gets me to the back of the wagon. I don't know where the white kid was at this point following. I'm not really sure. So the black EMS worker gets out, opens the door. I'm at the back of the door now, right? Ready to get in. He's going, and he starts to pull the gurney out. And I grabbed the gurney and I pushed it back and said, I'm here. We don't need that out. Just get me in the ambulance. I'm thinking at this point, man, this thing's been on long. I'm in pain. Now I'm pissed off. I'm at that point. I'm beyond, there's no fear. This is mad now. Just get me somewhere. I'm ticked off. They get me in the bed. And this was funny. I'm in the bed. Tony James, my buddy, gets in. I've got one worker here, and Tony's right in front of me. And everybody just stands there. And the door's closed by now. And I'm thinking, what are we doing? Let's go, something. Tony goes, do y'all want me to drive so y'all can do work? Or what do you want me to do? And the white kid was like, nope, I can drive. And he disappeared. He didn't want nothing to do with it. He's like, I'm out of here. So he jumps in the front seat and he starts backing up because we're in this parking lot. And it's like the slowest backup ever. Beep, beep, beep. And I'm laying there. I'm like, God, this is my worst nightmare with these kids. And so then the black guy's just going, he's just kind of looking around like he's confused. And Tony went, what do you need me to get, man? What do you want me to do for you? He was like, I can't find my big gauze. And I'm thinking, screw your big gauze. Give me some pain medicine, something. Let's just get this show on the road. Just get me to the hospital. Yeah. And about that time, ambulance stops. The back door's open. And I swear to God, it was like the angels of heaven. Like the light came in. Two firefighter paramedics showed up. And come to find out, these two EMS workers they were just the simple life-saving. They couldn't administer medicine. They couldn't do any of this stuff. They were not paramedics. And the one guy looks at me and went, I didn't expect it to be you. I went, I'm glad it's you. Let's go. I happen to know this guy. So he jumps in.
So the true heroes showed up.
Yes.
In the red truck.
We'll say
I
that.
understand.
We'll say that. I'll give him credit this night. And so his name's Josh Johnson. He jumps in, his partner. They were great, man. They just went
to town.
They told him, stand back, take the times. That's all we need you to do, take times. So this guy never helped me one. He did nothing. He recorded the times of the medicine they administered and what they did.
May have been better if it was that way. Sounds like he was.
Oh, 100%.
He was, might have been over the front of his skis on what he was tasked to do that night.
So
what's happening at the building at this point in time? I mean, if there's an engagement like that at the threshold and fire is exchanged, do you guys clear the building? What's the policy? Do you back off?
If it's not an active shooter where other people are getting hurt, if it was just an attack on the police, you back off, you call out SWAT, H&T, hostage negotiating team, to try to get them out if they don't come out on their own accord. So they had set up a perimeter around this building and they were calling him out. And by the time I left, he hadn't come out. So what happened after the shooting was he called his mom first.
Before coming out, obviously.
Yes.
We're talking here? Okay.
Called his mom. He waited 5 minutes to call his mom, I think. Then he called 911. And then he called her mom. He still hadn't come out. And the police couldn't go in to treat her because you have a threat inside that won't come out. Even though they're yelling, come out, please, come out. He knows it's the police by now. The sirens have come. The car busted through the gate 10 minutes prior. So he was in there almost 16 minutes before he decided to come out. And by this time, Breonna had passed. And the stories he started telling, so when he first came out, they were like, is anybody else in there? No, just my girlfriend. Did you shoot or did she shoot? He said, she shot. He threw her under the bus right away. He didn't want nothing to do with it. Later on, he came off of it that he did it. But all this time passed that she could have gotten attention and didn't. And then later on, the cops were blamed for not giving her, for taking me to the hospital and not treating her, but they couldn't get in there. So it was just everything was just a cluster.
When did you realize that the situation that you were involved with was going to potentially build into something greater than you originally thought it had been?
Originally, right away. Now, because ever since Ferguson, what we were talking about earlier, and it shouldn't be this way, but this is what it is. Every time somebody you know is involved in a shooting, the first question you ask is, were they white or black? It's not because you're racist, but
it's a fucked up question, but it's a legitimate one.
You want to know where this is getting ready to go.
Yeah.
Now, the question should simply be, is it justified? Was it a good shoot or bad shoot? Period. It shouldn't matter color, race, gender, any of that stuff. So when I didn't know if anybody had been shot when I went to the hospital and I went to surgery, I woke up, and one of my first questions was anybody hurt besides me? Was anybody hurt? And they said, yeah. They told me, and I was like, oh, crap. And I thought, this ain't going to be good. The only thing we had going for us was March 13th is the day that the nation shut down for COVID, for coronavirus. So we were kind of put on the back burner, and the president's talking every day, the mayors, the governors. It was all consuming. So I thought, we dodged a bullet here. Even though we were justified in what we did, I know how this stuff plays out. And I was thinking, man, if this continues down this path, we're okay. And then about mid-May, in April, Ahmaud Arbery happened. And Benjamin Crump, the lawyer from Atlanta, came on that case and making a lot of noise about it. Well, the people on Breonna Taylor's family's attorney team, one of them knew Benjamin Crump, had worked for him in their law, after law school or something. And so they reached out to him. Well, he came on the case. Well, once he did, he was combining the two cases together. Whites are out here assassinating blacks. These guys in Atlanta doing the same thing the police in Louisville are doing. And so you could feel the tension starting to pick up in the air. The media coverage was starting to change a little bit. There was a little bit of a lull in the COVID stuff wasn't as serious as it was. I mean, it was serious, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it was 2 months prior. And so I reached out to our city council president, who's a retired cop, one of my trainers in the academy, used to be FOP president. And I said, David, all this stuff that's coming out is not true and you know it. I said, here's what they're saying. I named like 7 or 8 things that were false. And then I named the truth. Here's what happened. And I named it all. I said, can you please get this out? Because the mayor and the chief aren't, and things are getting ready to go bad. You can just feel it. And this is before George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And he made the statement, yeah, I'll do it. And because I know our mayor sucks and he won't get it out. So I'll hold a press conference Monday and put it out. This was a Friday, I believe. And I thought, good, somebody's going to do something. He's got all the information now, which he had it. I think he had it prior, but claimed he didn't. Monday came and went, no press conference. Then he started getting on the news. So there's a backstory to that. His agenda was, our mayor's on his 3rd term. He can't run again. David James is a Democratic figure in the city, black man, known. But I still thought he'd be pro-police, at this point, because he was a cop for 20 years. So instantly he's on the news on these live feeds talking crap, like, oh yeah, the police shouldn't have done a no-knock warrant and this and that. I'm like, you've got all the information at your disposal. I gave it to you, and you're doing nothing with it but bashing us. So I was like, well, that ain't going to work. Then the story came out about the statement we talked about earlier with the Postal Service, how that was incorrect. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden it looked like we were drumming up probable cause just to get in there and execute this poor girl. Then George Floyd happened, and the day after that, all hell broke loose. And the first night of our riots in Louisville, 7 people were shot, and stuff just started getting destroyed. Then outside people started coming in, and it was just a mess after that.
Do you think it's possible? I'm going to change that question, because I almost said, do you think it's possible to restore the faith and trust in law enforcement? But that's not a correct question, because it hasn't been lost by everybody. For people who are going to believe what they hear at face value, I mean, how do we step back from where we are currently and get closer to where we should be?
Well, I think when they instituted body cams, they thought, we're going to have an aha moment here with the police, right?
Be more clarity, right? People can see exactly what happened.
But the other side thought, we're going to get you now, cops, because you do all this bad stuff. And now I think it's 95% is the stat that of the complaints that come in that are the ahas, once they review the body cam, go, that was you. That wasn't the cop that started this or caused this or did this or that. So it's backfired. I think the problem lies with police departments. So when we screw up, we should be the first ones that come out and go, we messed up. We did this wrong. We messed up. This is how we're going to remedy this. These are the steps we're taking to make it not happen again. And we don't do that. A lot of it turns into sudden, man, how can we make this hurt less? How can we push this under the rug? Let's just not talk about it. Maybe it'll go away. And so when you do that, when you claim responsibility and you step up and you own what you do wrong, then now I've got some credibility, right? So when the other things come out and I'm in the right and I tell you, no, Breonna's name was on the warrant. No, she wasn't in bed asleep. No, he didn't. He wasn't already in custody hours prior. Now they'll go, maybe they're telling the truth because they did tell us when they screwed up last time. So maybe if we just become transparent, like all these politicians talk that never do, they're the least transparent people in the world, but they talk about it the most. If we would just do that, claim up ownership when you screw up, but then fight like hell when you did the right thing and you're getting accused of wrong. And I think that'll bring the majority. You're going to have some people, no matter what you do, they're not. Of course, it doesn't matter.
I wonder. Take one of those comments as an example. She was executed in her bed. I actually heard that one, not like directly in an interaction with somebody, but I would see media capture where people were saying that. I don't know once information like that is put out, if there's actually a way to change people's minds about it.
Right.
I don't know the solution to that one.
Maybe if the courts allowed us to hold those attorneys accountable for all the lies they put out.
Was a lot of that information coming out from her, it would be at that point, I guess, her family's attorney?
Yeah. Well, that's where I heard it first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that can set in motion actions and consequences that there's no way that you're going to be able to unwind that.
Yeah, I mean,
it catches like wildfire.
Man, they have put my family's life in danger, and it didn't have to be. You know, let's let the case play out and see who's in the wrong and who's in the right and the facts of it, and then we can discuss them, and then we'll go from there. But instead, it's all these made-up stories that come out that then vilify you and make you look like some monster that you're not, and then everybody that's related to you or associated with that becomes in the crosshairs, and it's a dangerous game they're playing.
Yeah, it really is a dangerous game that they're playing. What was it that got you to the decision it was best to retire from the force? Because of the people that were at the threshold of the door, it's my understanding that you were the only one that was not fired.
Yeah, it's sad to say if I hadn't been shot, I probably would have been fired too. You know, being shot's what saved me, which sounds bizarre, but I think that's the only thing that kept me from getting fired that night too. So how did you phrase that question? I'm sorry.
What was it that got you to a place where you decided you wanted to retire? Because I'm assuming you could have stayed on the force.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was in recovery, immediately after, I told my wife, I said, I'm going back. I'm going through a door. It's the first thing I'm doing. I'm going to go through a door. I don't want to be scared of it, and it's not going to defeat me. It's like falling off a bike, get back on it. And she's like, oh, you're crazy. So I rehabbed hard, got back to where I could. And when I went into work, when all this blew up, I knew that part probably wasn't possible anymore because now I'm this liability, even though I'm not a liability, but on paper, you know, it looks like it, and I would be kind of a target of, oh, that's Mattingly. Okay, well, he did this to me. You know, now these accusations are different things. And I knew that I had a feeling the department wouldn't want that out there also. They wouldn't want me putting a uniform on with a name tag. But I thought, well, I'll try it anyway. We'll see. So I show up to work to come back. They said, you need to come back by this date. I said, okay. I show up, and I have a letter of involuntary transfer from the chief. And I was like, why am I getting transferred? I didn't violate policy. I didn't break any law. Why are they transferring me? They were like, well, it's just for the good of the department. They want to put you down in the property room to kind of hide you. Oh,
involuntary transfer inside of the department. So shifting your job.
Yeah. And so at that point, I had requested a couple meetings with the chief and got denied, even though she has this open door policy. And because I wanted to go and explain to her, I'd never met her. She was new. She got hired on as when all this was going on. In her first press conference, she came out and said, Breonna Taylor was killed in her bed and it shouldn't have happened. And they would never do this to a white family at this time of night. And I'm sitting there going, you're crazy. You know, have you even looked at our stats? It doesn't matter if they're white or black. We go wherever the crime leads us. And whatever time of day or night that's best for us or safest for us is when we do it.
Yeah.
And so that was her opening press conference to the city on TV, was that we killed Breonna in her bed and we would never do that to white people. So I was like, you know what? They're going to find a way to get rid of me. So I'm going to leave on my terms. And plus, when you work for them, you're limited to what you can say. And I was ready to defend myself. You know, I knew it wouldn't change a lot of things, but it would make me feel better. And so I was like,
at least give yourself a voice too.
Yeah, big time.
Looking back on it, you can always Monday morning quarterback tactical situations. All the way back to the briefing room, because it seems like that was probably your first interaction of what was going to be going on. Do you think that there's anything that you could have changed that would have not landed the situation where it did?
if I were doing it again, I'd probably ask a few more questions in the briefing room. How do you know she's not dating another guy? There are a lot of things that you could just ask that just weren't asked, because these things happen all the time where you're called in to help somebody else and you don't know anything about the case, but just do your job, because the job doesn't change. The case might change or the facts, but how you approach stuff most of the time doesn't change. You do it the same way. So I would ask more questions. Hopefully I wouldn't forget the shield was there, because that could have saved a lot of this. I would not have given that much time at the door, because I'm telling you, man, that much time at the door, I try to explain it to people. I'm like, it's kind of like when you got your popcorn in the microwave and it's got a minute left and you're staring at the microwave going, is this ever going to end? Or when you're at a red light in the middle of the night and nobody's around and the red light won't change and that minute seems like an hour. That's what it feels like at that door, not knowing what's on the other side. And you're like, why am I banging this long? This is stupid. All this stuff going on in your head. This don't feel right. So I would go quicker there and hopefully hit the target.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the outcome from a national level and the way that it was discussed. And quite frankly, it sounds like it was weaponized, which is kind of a polite term, actually. How much of what happened and the aftermath do you think was associated with timing?
A lot of it. So we had a couple things at our disadvantage. COVID was going on, so a lot of people were home just sucking in news and negative stuff and all that. So there was no in-person stuff. Kind of like the city council female, her name's Jessica Green, who is over public safety, on one of their Zoom meetings during all this, got on there and said, Kenneth Walker should not be in jail. He's a hero for what he did. He's the guy that shot me. This is our public safety city council member saying he's a hero for it. And not one of the pro-police council members spoke up. Nobody defended any of that. And again, this is all Zoom, so there's no in-person stuff where you can go and confront these people and say, hey, this is bull what you're saying. You're way off base. So COVID played a part in it, but the main thing was the elections. You were in that 2020 cycle coming up. Because I reached out to Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul's office, talked to both of them, not them personally, but
their people.
Yes, their main people. And Mitch McConnell's people were like, oh man, we're really sorry. We feel bad for you. But senators aren't allowed to get involved in federal investigations. I'm thinking, you all ask for them all the time. How can you not get involved in them? The most powerful Republican senator, and you can't do anything? You can't make a call? You can't ask some questions? Rand Paul's office seemed more accepting, but I guess when it got to him, it got shot down because we were supposed to go in for a meeting with him and talk and just explain some of the dynamics and what was going on. Because Rand Paul had used this, and I like Rand Paul for the most part, but he had used this. He's been against no-knocks for a long time. He's libertarian, more rights, legalize drugs, all that stuff. So he used this case to pass Breonna's law, which is bans no-knock warrants. And I'm back there wanting to punch a wall going, but we didn't use a no-knock warrant. So how, number one, are you naming it after her? And how are you using this tragedy to push your agenda through? So that kind of ticked me off too. Again, I don't have anything against him. He had been wanting this for a while. He found his opening. He took it. Whatever. That's what politicians do. So I think the politics of it with the election cycle played the biggest role, because once they had Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd to push that whole narrative, it was unstoppable. And they got their way.
Would you expect any reasonable officer to take different tactical actions at the threshold of that door once it opened?
That I took?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm thinking through the situation that you had described from a hostile act, hostile intent, identifying the threat, being on the receiving end of a round to begin with, and the actions that you took afterwards. I don't know what people expect of others when they are in that situation and the execution of their job. Like, what do you expect? What do people think that you should have done?
Well, I'll tell you this: the guy who investigated us for the police officer, sergeant who investigated us for policy violation, recommended, him and his lieutenant recommended that I be fired too. They said because she was so close to him, I should not have returned fire.
Well, I mean, I don't know anything about police policy or specifically in your jurisdiction, so I can't comment on that. But
It's not a policy. I mean, they made up some craziness and tried to push it through. Unfortunately, our chief at the time said, no, this ain't happening. But the new chief came in, and so typically in investigations that were released to the media and to the public, if an officer is found guilty of something, they'll release that file and the findings of it. But if an allegation comes in that is bogus or gets proven wrong, then that doesn't get released because it's not valid, right?
so they'll publicly display proof of guilt but not innocence.
Right. Which is fine. But in this case, she came in and she said, no, I don't like that rule. I'm changing it where everything's released. And so then the public and the media got a hold of, well, even their own police department said he should have been fired and shouldn't have shot back. And I'm thinking, that was this one coward, and he is a coward, and I would tell it to his face. He's never been a good cop. He's got the reputation of a coward. On the first day of the riots, he froze up and sat beside a car and cried and took mental health leave and never went back down to help them. And they put him on the case. He was kind of the henchman for anybody that the chief wanted to go after on the department.
How big of a strain on the city were those riots?
Oh, big. They lasted over a year. I mean, it was every day for over a year. Our downtown kind of went ghost town after that, business-wise.
Has it recovered?
Somewhat. It's slowly coming back. Some of those businesses will never be back. You know, those people that invested their life savings and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of heartbreaking for them. The mainstream businesses, some of them left, but the other ones have the funds to rebuild. And I hold the mayor accountable for that. You know, he can say all the right political stuff he wants, but your lack of action caused that. Because had you gotten in front of it and said, this is what happened, everybody pump the brakes, I'm on your side, pump the brakes, let's figure out what happened, but this is what we know so far, and what you're hearing isn't true, I think a lot of it could have been avoided.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. A lot of it could be avoided if you stop that cycle early. I think at some point it reaches an untenable tipping point where it can people are acting off of emotion, reacting to what they hear, true or false, and the action is already like the horse is out of the barn on that one. Yep. Where'd the desire to write the book come from?
I still didn't have a voice, and I was talking to somebody, and they were like, write a book, just write about it. So that's what I did, just sat down and typed away.
What's the goal of the book?
The goal isn't just vindication for me, okay? Because out of all the guys there, I'm the lucky one. That sounds bizarre. I mean, our family was uprooted. We had, for credible threats for hits taken out on us, and we had to move and sell our house and all that stuff. But the guys that, like Brett, still going to trial, possibly losing his freedom, Miles losing his job. My goal is to look at the public and go, hey, wake up. We need your support. Not the bad cops. If there's bad cops, get rid of them. Nobody wants that. Not even the good cops. None of us want them.
The group of people that I have found that hate bad cops the most are other good cops.
Yeah, 100%. Can't stand them.
Yeah.
There's a guy in our department now that's kind of getting away with something that everybody's known he's kind of shady for years, and he's disliked. And it's kind of – so what set the precedent of LMPD not being trustworthy was a bad cop. Several years ago in our Explorer program, which is, for the people that don't know, it's underage people who want to possibly be police officers later on. They get mentored by police officers. They get these little uniforms. They get to help on events and, feel cool. We all wanted that as a kid, right? And so we had a group of officers that had been cadets themselves that it's not proven. I think it's going to come eventually. But I think they were groomed in the same way they started grooming some of these other kids, and they were molesting them. And this guy, I remember the first time I met him, I thought, something's off with this dude. You could just tell. I'm like, he's creepy. I don't like him. I never talked to him. Just didn't like him. One of those guys. And there's not many people I don't like. But I looked at this guy. I was like, something. I didn't know what, but something's just off. super, butt kisser, and he was great. The command staff loved him, and he was awesome. And he wrote the most tickets, and and I'm not a ticket guy. I think I've written like 2 in my career. Can't stand writing tickets, but I knew something was off. Well, when this explorer came forward, the lieutenant in charge of, he was a major at that time, who was in charge of that program, who happened to be the lieutenant that was over this guy when he was in the explorer program. He was, if I can explain this correctly, the major that was now over it was his over him when he was in the explorer program. Now he's over the whole unit. He happened to go to church. This major happened to go to church with the guy whose daughter came to him, or he saw something on her phone, some pictures is what it was. He went to him at church and was like, hey, man, this wouldn't be good for your daughter. This wouldn't be good for the department. We'll take care of it internally. Let's just, So the cover-up started there. The mayor and the chief were notified of this. They knew. All of a sudden, other complaints came in of molestation.
From other than just this one girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the mayor and the chief sat on it. Didn't do anything. I mean, in my opinion, they're criminally liable for it because they allowed stuff to keep happening, knowing what was going on. So this cover-up happened for a couple of years before it was finally put out in the light. And this guy he's in prison now, thank God. And so is the other one. But the mistrust that came from the police department then was like, man, you won't even out a child molester?
Yeah. The
what else were you covering up?
The seeds of doubt and mistrust on that tree were planted pretty deep and watered.
Right. But then this is the same police chief and same mayor that wouldn't say anything about this case. I mean, that was kind of their MO. Let's just not talk about it and it'll go away,
Yeah. I think, I mean, I don't understand the motivation to not allow the truth to be told. I would assume or suspect that they're afraid of just getting crushed by the tsunami.
Yeah.
That's the only, and I'm not going to call it a reasonable guess, but or an excuse, but I think that's where it lands.
I think it's part of it. And maybe this is what you include in your crush. All these politicians have a goal for the next step, right?
Yeah.
Okay, when I leave mayor now I want to be senator or I want to be whatever. And I think, man, am I giving the guy that's going to run against me ammunition because I'm the one in charge here? And if I can't keep these guys in order, how am I going to run even, a bigger ship? So I think that's part of it. I think all these politicians, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have been in these raised in these Ivy Leagues and come from money, and they don't have a whole lot of real life experience and can't relate. And so they get in there and all of a sudden their little bubbled world is threatened to be crashed. And they're like, no, let's, put all these defenses up. And I can't be that guy because I've been protected my whole life. So I'm going to continue to be protected. Now I have the power to protect myself. And I think that's some of it that goes on.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, I have to hypothesize and guess as to what their motivations are, but I feel like allowing the narratives that are knowingly untrue, that I don't think it could be argued that they don't continue to sow distrust or widen the gap in trust that may already exist, could be anything other than a long-term recipe for disaster. It's not like it's going to get so bad that all of a sudden it's going to be great.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think this system is going to fall apart in the United States, but I also don't know where those actions lead.
Yeah.
And I don't want to find out, actually.
No, I don't either. I just hope the only hope we have is, we got a new mayor coming in because this guy's terms are going to be up. And I'm praying because I love my city. I've been there my whole life. I'm 49 years old. I'm praying that the next mayor comes in and puts somebody in authority who's qualified and capable and then lets him do his job. And you run the city and then put people in their figurehead positions that can run their departments and let them do it. If they mess up, get rid of them, get somebody who can.
Yeah, you have to empower them to actually do their job.
Yeah, and that's the problem, man. The police department was neutered, like I said, years ago. And so when I came on, your captains in the divisions, what I was talking about earlier, had so much authority because they couldn't just get bumped down in rank. And what they've done is they did away with our captains. They have what now is a major position, but they're all appointed. So if you're a lieutenant, any lieutenant on the department has a chance to become a major. If the city picks them and goes, okay, now we anoint you, you're the boss. Mm-hmm. And what that has done is it's caused a lot of backstabbing among lieutenants because everybody wants that next step. And it's one of the reasons I said, screw that. I never want any part of that. I like what I do. I just want to be a cop. I don't want to be a politician there. And also what it does is a few years back, I mean, these guys are smart. They know what they're doing. They started putting people in appointment spots from lieutenant to major who had like 14, 15 years on. So they have a long way before they can retire. So now you've got this super control over them, because if you don't do what I say, I'm bumping you down. Not only is that an ego hit, it's a financial hit. It's
they got
a career
a long way
hit.
to go until they retire, but they're also past halfway.
Yeah, you're stuck.
Yeah, you put somebody
You're stuck.
you put somebody in that boat who's 4 years in, and they'll go, I'll take option B, which is you going and fucking yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll go work for somebody who respects me.
It's an interesting move to put somebody there who is already committed more than half of the time required.
But it's brilliant.
And because you can carrot them to, carrot them. You could carrot them or entice them to stay.
You should get the carrot and the stick. It's kind of a mix of the two.
What I was brushing up on a little bit. I heard that the first publisher you had for your book changed their mind. How was that?
I think it turned out to be a blessing, because I'm with Daily Wire now. But
did they tell you why? I mean,
yeah. I've got a good relationship with the guy still.
Okay.
I text him at Christmas, tell him Merry Christmas. He responded. He's a good guy. Post Hill Press is who it was.
Yeah.
And it kind of got taken out of their hands. It really wasn't their fault, because they're a smaller publishing company, and so the distribution that they use is Simon & Schuster. They edit the books, they do all that, they hand it over to Simon & Schuster, they distribute it. So when Amazon has an order, they fulfill it there. They've got the capabilities, the reach, the connections, all that. And when it got out that I was doing a book, Simon & Schuster was fine initially, and then they started catching heat from all the crazies, and they shut it down. And when they did that, Post Hill no longer had an outlet.
Yeah, they didn't have an outlet. Yep.
To help me. And, we talked about it for probably 2 months before we finally said, we got to go a different route. And I reached out to a few people, and he did too. He helped me his name's Anthony Zaccardi. Again, good guy, really good guy. And he reached out and he helped me, and I had a couple options, and I went with Daily Wire.
Well, it sounds like he had an upstream problem that he wasn't going to be able to control.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So I have no hard feelings for him.
Yeah, it's just interesting, right? That the pressure that can come and the fear of being crushed by that tsunami can really modify people's behavior in ways that I don't think in the long term is beneficial for anybody.
Well, they got death threats. Their business got threatened to be burned. They had to hire security for like a month, police to sit out there. And their employees, their demographics is basically 21 to 30-year-old females was the majority of their workforce. And they were individually getting death threats, and it freaked him out.
It should.
Yes. And he was like, man, I'm going to lose half my employees are going to walk out on me because they're scared. And I was like, well, we don't want that. I don't want them to lose their jobs. I don't want you to go under because you stuck your neck out. Most people aren't even willing to do that.
Yeah.
So
have you had success changing people's minds who are viewing this incident through the lens of information that was put out that is inaccurate? Like when have you ever, the situation where you encounter somebody like, you murdered this person in their bed and it was a no-knock warrant. Do they listen when you actually tell them the truth, or are they convicted to that narrative?
Well, the only people I've talked to or had any communication with are the crazies online. And
that is where they live.
And most of them, again, if I showed them a video of proof, they wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. That's where I land with a lot of those people too.
Yeah. Now I've had several people come to me, like people at their work that I know, and they've told them a real story, and they flip them just with truth. The editor of the book, who doesn't work for Daily Wire, she's third party source. I had to talk to her back and forth during the book, and she told me when it was over, she said I flipped her because she only had the information that was given to her by the media. So that was a positive thing, because I've got supporters and I've got haters, and then you've got a bunch of people in the middle on the fence that don't really know the truth. Yeah. You're raised your whole life to believe the media. You're like, if I don't know the source, I turn on the news at night and I watch, oh, there's my news. Now I know. And unless you've been through something, or unless you've done what you've done, a lot of people still believe the media. And that's the only source they've had. And unfortunately, we had no pushback.
The media is not always wrong, but they're just not always right.
Yeah. And again, the media may have just been going by what the attorney said and running with the information they had. Not all of them had the documents and the proof. And so then it got to a tipping point where even they were forced to stick with the narrative once they were with it for so long. And I mean, they weren't forced to, but they did because of the pressure. Because like a local station ran a story on Breonna's possible dealings after jail calls came out and stuff of her holding cash and doing different things. And they got so much hate and threats that they pulled the story. It got scrubbed.
Yeah.
So people just don't want to hear the truth.
Well, some people don't want to hear the truth.
I
think people who want to weaponize a narrative, the biggest threat to any narrative would be information, especially true information that shows a different perspective. And it might actually make your information and your narrative less powerful.
Yeah.
Especially if you were trying to motivate people to take action upon that.
Right. And one of the biggest hates I've gotten from these people, same type people, is how can you possibly profit off killing somebody? And I'm thinking, well, I'm not profiting off her death. I'm profiting off my story. Yeah. It's my story to tell. I'm going to tell it because my career was essentially taken from me. Half of my income was taken because when you retire, you don't get near as much as when you're working and working overtime and all that.
It's great math, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gone.
Same in the government, yeah.
And so I've got to provide for my family somehow. I'm not like, people aren't going to go, hey, man, we want you to work for us and we're going to put your name on stuff because they don't want to get attacked either. They might even be good people, but they're just not cut that way where they're willing to stick their neck out for somebody. And I tell these people, I said, wait a minute, you're blaming me for this? What about Black Lives Matter who made tens of millions off this? What about Ben Crump and their attorney who got 30 or 40% of the $12 million settlement from the city? What about the 3 or 4 documentaries that have been made by Netflix, Hulu, ABC, or New York Times? Are you complaining to them? Have you reached out to them and said, why are you making this money? What are you doing with the money you're making off this? No, because they don't care about that because it's not the true beef they have. The beef they have is I'm a white cop and there's a black dead person.
What are you going to do next?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to be, I've traveled some and spoke. And that's kind of what I want to do. I actually wanted to run for Congress. But my wife was like, oh my gosh, no, we've been through enough, just breathe. But, I'm a fighter. So I was like, no, man, if there's ever been a time to run, now is it. I've got a little bit of name notoriety in the state. So, and that's a huge thing in running. If you've heard the name, if you know who they are. Yeah. And with the cycle of the possible flipping of the House this coming time, I thought everything's primed. This is it. And, but she talked me out of it. And so maybe next time, maybe in 24, I don't know. But with the book, we'll see what comes from that. Mainly I want to go help people. So the shirt I'm wearing, I'm going to get this in. It's called The Wounded Blue. And I think your buddy has pipe hitters.
Yes, even though now I want to change it to pipe fitters because that's awesome. You hear that, Eddie?
Sorry, Gallagher, my bad. Don't beat me up.
Pipe fitters organization.
Yes. So Wounded Blue, a guy named Randy Sutton, retired lieutenant from Las Vegas. What he does, he kind of got screwed over at the end of his career by his department in city. And so he felt the need to start an organization to have people out. And you had Dages on here a couple weeks ago. So I ran into them in Vegas last year at this event. This is the first annual event they had. Okay. And I didn't know who they were, and they obviously didn't know who I was, and we didn't even speak, but I remember seeing them. And then when I saw their story online, I'm like, wait a minute. And I messaged them, like, were you at the Wounded Blue in Vegas? They were like, yeah. I said, I thought I saw you, but I didn't know who you were at the time, because his stuff was fairly new then. Yeah. And the thing that he's doing with this organization is he's taking these guys in, like they've got a documentary out, and if people should go, it's called the Wounded Blue Films or Wounded Blue Documentary.
Do you know what service it's on?
No,
platform?
Okay. I think it's on YouTube.
Okay, I'm sure,
but I'm not positive. If they Google it, they'll find it.
I was just going to say it's
I think it's like
valuable tool,
99 cents or something to watch it. But anyway, one of them on there is like a lieutenant on a police department. This is all on video. He's in his squad car and they're chasing a dangerous subject, and The guy leans out, one of the guys in the car, and starts popping off with 223, comes through his windshield, hits him in the head. Goes off the road, wrecks his car. As during his recovery phase, the department wouldn't pay his medical bills. The workman's comp wouldn't. And because it messed him up, I mean, 223, the head's gonna mess you up. So he slurs his speech a little bit, and I don't know all his physical ailments, but he couldn't return to work, not as a police officer. Lost his house, lost his car, couldn't hardly feed his family.
How is it possible that workman's comp would not cover that?
Eventually, like 2.5 years later of fighting him, they paid the medical bills. But they didn't pay, but he didn't get any of that salary pay that you normally get while you're on.
Yeah.
I mean, so I sit there and I met that guy and I heard that story at this conference, and I met another guy who was in a car wreck and burned up, and you probably know him online. I can't remember his name, but and his attitude was so positive and so awesome. And then I hear another story and another story and another story. These guys just got screwed over by their departments and cities when they've been through an event that wasn't their fault, doing the job you asked them to do, going out, risking their life, almost dying. And now the department goes, yeah, it's a little bit too hot for us. Just go away. We don't want anything to do with you. And so what he does is he helps those guys. And so my goal is to help people. If I can help somebody with this book, if I can change some mayor down the line's decision on releasing info, if I can help a young cop who's been through it, because if I hadn't had 19 years on at the time and didn't have the connections I had, I don't know what I would have done, because they wouldn't tell me a thing. I mean, nothing. The FBI wouldn't. They had the murder for hire case. They wouldn't respond to calls. They wouldn't talk to me. They dropped the case after 10 days, because it was the optics looked bad going after a national victim's mother, and it's just all corrupt. And if I can help somebody, I went through a course a couple weeks ago on a post-traumatic event to try to. I'm going to go back to it and get certified so I can help people.
Yeah.
Because,
help people navigate those events.
Yes.
The consequences.
Because there's no guidebook. There's no playbook. They teach you how to shoot. They teach you how to fight. They teach you how to take reports. There's no teaching on, if you're involved in a critical incident, what to do. No guidebook. Give me a checklist. Give me a emergency contact list. Give me a freeze up your social media. Put your stuff in a trust. All these things that can protect you. Here's the info. I've got it all for scrubbing your stuff off the internet. Mm-hmm. There's so many steps that could be taken that every time one of these guys goes through this event, it's recreating the wheel. And it's stupid, because there's been plenty of guys that have been through it. Why can't we pull these resources together and go, what were you missing? What did you need that you weren't given? Okay, how can we guide these guys to that in a much easier way than trying to figure it out themselves? Because it's hard.
Yeah, and you're trying to figure that stuff out oftentimes in a crisis.
Yeah, and your brain ain't working right.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with things that you probably thought you were never going to, and having to consider options that you never thought would ever actually be options for you.
Right.
You think you'll stay in the city?
Oh,
you
no.
love it that much?
No, we had to move. I mean, with the death threats. And the death threats weren't necessarily the issue as much as there was no resolution to them. So it's different when I know you're coming after me, because I kind of know what to look for.
You'll never find me.
No, you're right. You're right. By the time I hear the bullet, I'm already on the ground. I get it.
But you wouldn't hear it if you were on the ground.
Hey, man, I'm like a cockroach. They haven't killed me yet. No, but knowing there's still an active threat is different than just sitting there floating. Car pulls up next to you slow, or they stop beside you, and you're always like, oh, shoot, is this it? So the fact that there's been basically a cover-up of that is the part that it just keeps me from being able to go back. And I hate that, but it's what it is.
Man, that is I don't know the right word to describe what it is that you went through in the environment that you were operating in. I hope that it gives people a little bit more clarity and insight, as opposed to a minute soundbite.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more in what you talked about over the last few hours than there is ever going to be in a minute soundbite. And it's only made worse when people are trying to take soundbites and weaponize them with information that is patently untrue.
Yeah, like we had that. When I talked to Strahan, went in, we talked for like 3 hours straight. No break, no nothing. Just talk, back and forth. And it was a pretty good talk. But then they took a couple minutes of it, chopped it up, And it made me look like my wife's like, man, you look like a jerk in that interview. And she was there the whole time and knows how it really went.
Yeah.
But she's like, when they played it, you look like a jerk, like you were arrogant. And I'm like,
when you can edit and I mean, I've had a couple hundred episodes come out at this point. Trust me, you could make me look like the most ferocious asshole on the face of the planet. And maybe I am. I don't know. It's my own fault for saying the things that I say. I accept accountability and responsibility for anything that comes out of my mouth. But you could also put words in front of other ones and make it appear to be something completely different.
right. Yeah, or take that answer and put it in front of a different question.
Correct.
Or a different part of the story. And so that stuff was frustrating. And there again, I didn't go with my gut. And I said, they gave me different options. Because at that point I was ready to talk. And I was ready to explode, because it was all in me. And I knew the truth. And they said, all right, here's your options: ABC, NBC, CBS, all these things. I'm thinking, man, why can't I just have like Fox or, somebody who's going to be somewhat friendly? Because I knew what I was walking into. I'm not dumb. And I said, it's fine, I'll take that. And they were like, well, who do you want out of ABC wants to know who you want, blah, 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 blah. And I went, well, give me Strahan. At least he was a former athlete, not a career. Mm-hmm. And he was, honestly, he was a nice guy, in person. We got along fine.
And he probably had zero control over the edit too.
None of the edit. Now, he did come in with an attitude. He came in very against me in the talking. So I watched ABC's interviews with Kenneth Walker. And oh, baby. Oh, did they do that to you? Oh, my goodness. Oh, how could they do that to love you? All this stuff. And I'm going, this is so putrid. So when he comes in, there was no hi, there was no nothing. Sit down and boom, 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 boom. Why'd you do this? So why'd you do that? And, you can just tell when somebody's talking to you or talking at you. He was talking at me. And so I was like, I ain't backing down from this. So I just went back and forth with him for 3 hours. And at the end, he was like, man, I like you. But then he goes on, and he does what he has to do to keep his job. He goes on there and goes, oh, I can't believe this and that. I'm like, what? That's not what you told me face to face. But
what advice would you give to active law enforcement right now? I mean, now that you're on the outside of the bubble that they operate in, what would you tell them?
As a whole, or as like if they're in this situation, which one?
Both.
I'd say as a whole, man, you've got to keep doing your job. If you're there to help, you're there to help, because you've got this very small group of people who don't like you, or you've got maybe your administration or city leaders that may not support you, but that's not why you do the job anyway. And when you come in here, and I tell people this, they're like, oh, you're racist, you're this, you're that. I'm thinking, okay, why would a white guy leave the suburbs, leave his family, kiss him goodbye, go down to an area that hates him, that's primarily black, save their lives, be willing to die for somebody down there that I don't know and don't like me? How does that make me a racist? So you got to put all that noise aside and just go do your job, because the reason we do it is to help people. It really is. It's to have fun too. It's a fun job. It really is, or at least it used to be. I don't know what it is now, but no, it's just to help people and keep doing it. But now with the body cameras, God, I wish there would have been one on that night. I really do. I was against them when they first came out, because I'm thinking, man, this is just so, it feels like such an invasion of privacy, always having this thing on you all the time, watching what you do. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, that'd have been a godsend that night. If one of those guys had turned theirs on, or if there had been some kind of security camera, the truth would be on video.
Yeah.
So, but my biggest advice is just treat people like you want to be treated. That's the biggest flaw I see in policing, is rudeness by cops. I mean, I was telling the story the other day that I would hate it when you be with a guy who is kind of, the guy that wears his sunglasses on his head. He's the cool guy.
Peacock.
Yeah. And you go into a convenience store and some guy goes, hey, officer, thanks for what you're doing. He goes, I don't shake hands. And I'm going, oh, my God. You just set this guy, you turn this guy off. This guy was in your corner. Why would you do that? And so I think a lot of it is just, and when you first show up on scene, I mean, you got to remember, you're dealing with people on the worst day of their life. They're in a crisis mode when you show up. And either they're going to hate you or love you. There's not much in between there. And if you're locking them up, they hate you. If you're saving them or helping them, they love you. So you've got to come in with that neutral attitude and kindness, but be ready to kill anybody you come across, because that's the way it is out there.
What advice would you give to people who have been involved in an incident, maybe similar or peripheral to something like you went through?
I would find a good organization like Wounded Blue or other people who've been through it and reach out to them first before I made any major moves. Again, I think there's some protocols we can set in place through FOPs that have these checklists of these guys that need to do immediately or even beforehand, like putting your stuff in a trust so somebody can't just boom, boom, boom. Oh, there he lives over on 123 Clown
dox
Street.
you.
Yeah, because that happened. But that's stuff you don't even think about. But I would say there has to be resources available for them to reach out to. And that's what I want to be. I want to be one of those resources. Reach out to me so I can help navigate you through some of this. I don't know it all. I know very little. But that's what I'm trying to do is educate myself. And the only way to do that is to talk to other guys who've been through it and pull from them, because only a fool doesn't learn from somebody else's mistakes. You know, we all learn from mistakes, but I'd rather learn from your mistakes than mine. And so I think just having that voice, somebody to bounce stuff off of, would be huge.
It's helpful in those moments
Yeah.
where you're unsure of what you should do or even what your options are.
Because not only are you trying to defend yourself, right? You're trying to keep your job, keep your freedom, figure out what's going on. You still got to be a dad and a husband. And now your wife's freaking out. So now then you're over here playing social worker, trying to keep her calm, and you're trying to keep your kids protected. And so I think that you ask, what do I want to get out with this book? To the general public, I want people to realize we're humans. I mean, we are you. We're the same. There's putting a badge on doesn't give you a cape, doesn't make you any different. We're just people who chose to serve. This is the profession we chose. And when things go sideways, they go sideways for us too. It's not just the other person that's involved. And if you could take a minute before you post something or before you make a quick judgment and just go, all right, let's get all the facts. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, that's where you just got to eat it. But human, I mean, we're all just humans.
Yeah, it's easy to vilify others, you know, to expect perfection out of others. And it's impossible to expect it out of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a tough one. It's easier to point and say, well, why would you do that? As opposed to looking in the mirror and like, well, why did you do that?
Yeah.
So, closing thoughts, John. I'll let you go close it out. We've been at it for 2.5 some hours.
Man, I just want to tell the people who have supported. I mean, even people I don't know. And that was huge too. I had two people send me a card before all this blew up, and one was from Florida and one was from somewhere out west here. I can't remember. And don't know them. Still haven't met them. One of them had a full name. One of them just had a first name on it. And I thought, man, somebody took the time to actually do that. And it's just a little bitty thing. So if people want to encourage the police, it's not, you don't have to go buy them stuff. You don't have to, put a sign up in your yard. Just when you see them, tell them thank you. The little bitty things that, especially right now, that where the encouragement needs to come into play, those little things are huge. It's no different than, the little things you do for your spouse or kids. It's the same mindset.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get lost in what I think or assume is the very, very vocal minority.
Yeah.
I think the more often silent majority. I don't know if the support and respect of that organization and what they do has been lost. I think what has been lost, or lost because they're not doing anything with their voice, is that another voice and another narrative is just kind of riding the tide.
Yeah, the messaging hadn't been put out correctly.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you taking the time to come and unpack this. I was kind of viewing this episode too through the lens of, I don't want to dive too deep into your backstory because I wanted to juxtapose what I had heard from the situation just through the media outlets that I have access to versus the reality of on the ground.
Yeah.
Let's just say that they were very different.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I didn't research it too deeply.
There are a ton of nuances that have taken place too that, I mean, I've forgotten half of them, or I remember them later, or that I'm thinking nobody will ever know.
If only there was a book that you could put them in.
Well, a lot of these have happened since. For instance, let me give you this. So the lady that called Kenneth Walker a hero, our governor used a executive order last week to promote her to a circuit court judge vacancy seat. And I'm thinking, her statements are out there. You know what they are. And you know she's not neutral. She's very biased. Why would you reward somebody with a judge's seat that has said this stuff about police?
Depends on the game you're playing.
Yeah. I guess I'm not in that game.
So I can't claim to understand it.
Yeah.
So thank you again, man. That was
all
awesome.
Right. Get the book, 12 Seconds in the Dark.
There you
Anywhere
go.
you can get books.